It is my duty to inform the House that the Speaker is unavoidably absent. Therefore, in accordance with the statutes, I would kindly ask the Deputy Speaker to please take the chair.
Good afternoon, everybody. Please be seated. Routine proceedings, introduction of bills, committee reports, tabling of reports, ministerial statements, members' statements. The Honourable Member for Dawson Trail.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, it is with great pleasure today I highlight two individuals in the Dawson Trail heroes, Jacqueline Hertz and Christina Swanson. This past week I was invited to be part of the MLA to Work Day. The purpose of Take Your MLA to Work Day is to celebrate the contributions that Manitobans with disabilities are making to workplaces in Manitoba. Having an inclusive workplace that welcomes and acknowledges the value of all people is crucial to a positive, productive, and healthy work environment. I had the pleasure of meeting Jacqueline, who allowed me to shadow her at her workplace. Jacqueline is a very hard worker. Jacqueline's tasks at work include ensuring things are clean and operating as they should in the car wash bays, pumping fuel, stocking coolers and supplies, prepping slushies, and maintaining the cleanliness of the store. Jacqueline is steadily working towards her goals, which are being able to get her own place to live and work her way up to a position that carries more responsibilities. Today, Jacqueline is joined by Christina Swanson, who is the coordinator at Envision Community Living. She has been running Eastman Employment Services for over 20 years and has built it up from 30 individuals to 200 annually. Christina describes Jacqueline as a friendly, dedicated person, and it is no surprise how well she fits in with the team at Clearview Co-op in St. Anne. It was in 2019 when Eastman Employment Services connected with Jacqueline as she was prepping to graduate high school. Jacqueline applied and was accepted into the STRIDE program. The STRIDE program is an initiative that aims to equip young adults with the skills and confidence needed to excel in their life and workplace. They focus on the gap between school and work for students with disability and include internships as well as several pre-employment and life skill building models.
Member's time has expired. Leave has been granted. Oh. I have to acknowledge you. The Honourable Member for Dawson Trail.
I would like to thank Jacqueline and Christina for allowing me to be part of this initiative. It was a pleasure meeting both of you, and I look forward to running into you in the community.
The Honourable Member for Concordia.
I rise today to recognize the Bethania Mennonite Personal Care Home on their 75th anniversary of exceptional seniors care in our community. Originally located in Middlechurch, Bethania was one of the Mennonite community's signature contributions to the provincial health and care systems. Before public funding, it was facilities like Bethania that provided this essential care for our elders. A new facility was developed jointly with Concordia Hospital in the 1970s to have better access to medical resources, and they have flourished there ever since. A fundamental tenet of Bethania is that health and healing encompasses not only the physical and psychological, but also the spiritual dimensions. Spiritual care forms an integral component of daily life as residents partake in singing and music, are given opportunities to nurture relationships, share stories, and hope for the future. As care extends to end of life with scriptural encouragement, prayer support, visitations, and constant positive presence of staff. The Bethania Spiritual Care Program is funded solely through the generosity of the community. Local churches provide volunteers and pastors, and the program is managed by an on-staff chaplain. For 11 years, that chaplain has been Ferdinand Funk, who has provided outstanding support to residents, families, and staff. Chaplain Funk recently announced that he is moving on from Bethania, so I want to personally thank him for his service and recognize his dedication over the years. I was pleased to join with friends and supporters of Bethania last Thursday at a dinner to celebrate this milestone. The evening included a keynote speech by Aaron Epp and a performance by award-winning musician Steve Bell, but the highlight may have been the spontaneous four-part harmony that emerged as the crowd sang "Praise God from whom all blessings flow," something that could only happen as we were finally able to gather in person once again. On behalf of all members of this legislature, I want to thank the organizers of this wonderful celebration, as well as the staff, volunteers, and supporters of Bethania over the past 75 years. I look forward to continuing to work with you as you move forward in your vital role in our community. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Kildonan River East.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, sadly, the war in Ukraine continues to rage. But as the war intensifies, so does the generosity of Manitobans. The atrocities we have observed in Ukraine have weighed heavy on all of our hearts. However, even during these darkest moments in Ukrainian history, we have all witnessed remarkable gestures of kindness, love, and goodness, many from within our very own communities. I am proud that Kildonan River East is one of these communities. Personally, I am immensely grateful to the thousands of Manitobans who opened their hearts, their homes, and their wallets to assist those families forced to flee their war-torn Ukraine. Mr. Speaker, I was overwhelmed by the mountain of donations of food, personal hygiene, baby products, and clothing that were dropped off at my office in response to the food drive I organized to aid our local refugee families. Manitobans are renowned for their generosity, and our province will always be known as the home of hope. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I am proud of our government, who stands strong in solidarity with Ukraine and its people. On July 14th, I was pleased to join our Premier and the Minister of Municipal Relations at Chornock Park to announce funding of $106,000 to support a 9-week summer camp established solely to assist the newly arrived Ukrainian refugee children as they transition to their new life in their new homeland. Hosted by St. Anne Ukrainian Catholic Parish, the children enjoyed an action-packed summer of social activities where they experienced firsthand the beauty of our province. Spiritual learning and healing was also an important component of their daily routine. I was excited to host a pizza lunch and ice cream on the last day of the UN camp, and have to share that it was absolutely heartwarming to watch the kids do what kids do best, just have fun. Later, the kids entertained guests with a myriad of Ukrainian songs and dances, thrilled to show off their newfound friendships and confidence. Mr. Deputy Speaker, the proverb,
Member's
it takes
time
a
has
village.
expired. Leave has been granted. The honourable member for Kildonan River East.
Thank you. The proverb, it takes a village to raise a child, has never been more meaningful. To our Ukrainian community, the many volunteers, the Ukrainian Catholic Archeparchy, the Ukrainian Canadian Congress, I say Duja Jakyu for opening your hearts to bring hope and a little happiness to these lives of these children. Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker.
The honourable member for Thompson.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, before I begin, I would like to call attention to a terrible tragedy that occurred just last night in Thompson. Thompson RCMP and Fire and Paramedic Services responded to a house fire last night that took the lives of 4 children under 10 years old. I would like to ask the House to keep the family and the community in their thoughts and prayers in the coming days. I would like to stand today to acknowledge and welcome the newly appointed Lieutenant Governor of Manitoba, Anita Neville. As many have already stated this week, she has been a champion of many issues and has devoted her life in her name of service for many years already. The ceremony in her honor earlier this week was astounding, and a wonderful display of the ceremony involved in her role as Vistroso, as well as recognition of her outstanding history as a parliamentarian and a community leader. As a First Nation person, former chief, I know the importance of the relationship between First Nations and the Crown and its representatives. As Lieutenant Governor is designated Vistroso of Manitoba, it is uplifting to see an appointee with such history of advocacy for her communities. It is encouraging to see a Lieutenant Governor who has worked with marginalized people for so long to uplift the voices of our communities. Along with the new Lieutenant Governor comes new opportunity, further the relationship between Indigenous people in Manitoba. I sincerely look forward to a future of making positive change with the new Lieutenant Governor. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, Deputy Speaker.
On a point of order, the honourable member for Radisson on a point of order.
I would ask if you could canvass the House if there's leave in light of the member statement and the loss of the 4 children in Thompson, if there's leave for a moment of silence.
Is there leave for a moment of silence? All rise. The honourable member for St. Boniface.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Last night I attended a preview of an extraordinary exhibition at Osaderok Ukrainian Cultural Center and Museum, Ukraine, Land of the Brave. It celebrates the creative achievements of Ukrainians from around the world with some extraordinary art and an incredible immersive exhibit with video directly from the front lines. It was a deeply moving experience thanks to the words of Andriy Shevchenko, a former ambassador from Ukraine to Canada. I met Mr. Shevchenko at Osaderok in 2019, commemorating the fact that a century ago, when Ukraine was struggling for independence under the threat of Russian aggression, that one of the central outposts for an independent Ukraine was here in Winnipeg. He is no longer the ambassador living in Ottawa. He came straight from Ukraine. And when he spoke last night, he spoke as someone whose country is at war and whose family is under fire. Tragically, Mr. Shevchenko's brother was killed in action, leading troops 3 months ago. And he said that his young daughter has come to like the noise of the sirens that precede missile strikes because it means she gets more screen time as she curls up with a device to watch Peppa Pig in the safest corner of the house until the danger passes. As he said last night, this is not just a fight for Ukraine, this is a fight for the world. It's a fight for the kind of world we live in, and an attempt to control not just Ukraine but Europe, to undermine and disrupt our economies and turn us against each other. We are being deliberately squeezed by Russian manipulation of energy prices and supplies to get us to cave in and surrender to Putin's demands and to turn us against each other. The courage of Ukrainians, especially President Zelensky, has been a real light in the darkness, standing up against a global wave of authoritarian governments with clarity, purpose, hope, and astounding bravery. Ukraine has the right to chart its own destiny. We can all be doing more to rally and support Ukraine because their fight is our fight, and it is the fight of our time. There are resources on Osaderok's website on how to help Ukraine directly, and I encourage everyone to see the exhibition, which is free, from October 31st to April 30th. Slava Ukraina.
Oral questions. The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
I add my condolences to those of my colleague from Thompson and send our continued commitment to help to his community and to Northern Manitoba at this difficult time. I also, on a somewhat more somber note, want to extend my congratulations to Mayor Smook of that community on her re-election, as well as to Mayors Larry Johansson and Brandon Burley on their re-elections in Selkirk and Morden, respectively, as well as to newly elected leaders in Dauphin, in the form of David Boziak, the Mayor of Brandon, Jeff Fawcett, and of course right here in Winnipeg with Scott Gillingham. We had many folks who were newly elected last night, and we certainly do wish them our best in serving this province. I would be remiss, of course, if I didn't also congratulate Kathy Merrick, who made history in becoming the first woman Grand Chief of the Assembly of Manitoba Chiefs. So way ne to her. I do have a question on healthcare, but wanted to make those remarks first.
The Honourable First Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker, and I do want to send our deepest condolences to the family who lost their loved ones in a house fire last evening in Thompson. 4 children lost their lives in this horrific tragedy, and our thoughts and prayers go out to the family as they mourn this horrific tragedy that's taken place. I want to thank the member for Thompson for his statement today and for rightly recognizing this tragedy in the way of a moment of silence here in the chamber. Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. We hear today from the Manitoba Nurses Union that the NICU at Brandon Hospital is, quote, drowning, end quote. There's no healthcare aid, there's no clerk, there's no CRN, and there is no in-house doctor. Staff are burning out, and this is very concerning. After all, a neonatal intensive care unit cares for the sickest of infants and young children. It's clear that there's not enough staff to properly run this unit in Brandon as of right now. Which steps will the Premier and her government take to ensure that the damage to Brandon's NICU is repaired?
The Honourable First Minister.
I want to thank the Leader of the Opposition for the question about healthcare in the Brandon region. I know that we have already announced some upgrades to the facility in Brandon to ensure that Manitobans in that region can get better access to care closer to home. And so I just want to thank all of those who work in our front lines. We recognize the challenges that they're facing day in and day out in a healthcare system. Obviously, human resources is a significant challenge, not just here in Manitoba, but of course, right across our country, and we'll continue to work towards addressing those issues.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition on a final supplementary.
The current crisis that we see in the healthcare system is certainly put into stark relief when we reflect on the lack of staffing for this neonatal intensive care unit in Brandon. That same message from the nurses' representatives points out that a new facility will not address the needs at the bedside in the form of staff. So we need to see a concrete plan to deliver those healthcare aides, those physicians, and those nurses who will care for the sickest amongst our young children. This is, of course, similar to the SOS that we heard recently from the Grace Hospital. It comes during the same week as the alarm has been sounded at St. Boniface. There is a crisis in healthcare. We need to hear concrete steps. Which steps are the government going to take to respond to these direct and specific calls to help from the front lines of healthcare?
The Honourable First Minister.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Speaker, and certainly we recognize there's significant challenges with human resources across healthcare systems right across this country. Mr. Deputy Speaker, Leader of the Opposition has asked what action we're taking, and I can tell him again that we have announced 400 new nursing seats in the province of Manitoba, which will help address some of those issues. We also have internationally educated nurses that we're working towards ensuring that they get the licensing that they need to be working in our front lines in our province, Mr. Deputy Speaker. And I know the Regional Health Authority is working diligently to address some of these issues in the Brandon area.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition on a new question.
Every Manitoban can see that there has been a dramatic increase over the past 5 years in the number of people living in tents, living in bus shelters, living underneath bridges. This is a problem that we see in Winnipeg, but we also see it in communities like Thompson and Brandon and in other places across Manitoba. That's why we're committed to ending chronic homelessness in our great province. The Houston model offers a path. We think it should be replicated here. Will the Premier support our plan to end chronic homelessness in Manitoba?
The Honourable First Minister.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Speaker, and we share the concerns. Of course, we don't want people living in bus shelters or on the streets, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Just the other day, I was up in Thompson and visited the healing center that has recently opened up in Thompson to help address some of those issues in that community. And of course, we are looking at a holistic approach when it comes to this. There's significant challenges when it comes to homelessness and mental health and addictions that have really come out of the pandemic. We recognize there's challenges there, and we are working in a holistic way to address those issues.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition with a follow-up.
When folks go to a hockey game or to a concert downtown, when people bring in out-of-province guests or business partners or potential investors and they see people sleeping in bus shelters, they know that we can do better. The challenges that we're confronted with here are long-standing. Certainly they emerged long before the pandemic, and everyone in Manitoba has noticed that this issue has become particularly pronounced over the last 5 years. We also know that there are examples which can be used as a best practice, sources to emulate. We see one of those with the Houston model. Governments who are willing to engage can actually lead the path towards success when it comes to providing dignity for folks who are currently out on the streets and providing an increased sense of pride for everyone here in Manitoba. We've brought forward a plan to end chronic homelessness in Manitoba. Will the Premier work with us to bring about more dignity for people from all walks of life in Manitoba?
The Honourable First Minister.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Speaker. And this is a serious challenge, obviously, that we're facing in our community, and that's why we are taking action. We have invested more than $5 million in the Downtown Community Safety Partnership, and I want to thank all of those individuals who are working day in, day out to ensure the safety of those individuals who are on our streets in downtown Winnipeg. We also made significant investments as well in Nadina Waymack as well, and we'll continue to make those investments. And we'll continue to take a holistic approach when it comes to this. We know that mental health and addictions is a very significant challenge. Homelessness, very significant challenge, particularly coming out of the pandemic. So we'll continue to take these types of action.
Hear, hear. The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition on a final supplementary.
The PC approach to homelessness cannot be said to be holistic so long as they take an ideological approach to the addictions crisis. The fact that they, out of ideology, rule out a safer consumption site or harm reduction approaches is one of the contributing factors to why this situation is getting worse. The cuts to mental health, the cuts to healthcare, and the cuts to social services and housing are other contributing factors. We have brought forward a plan. We have studied best practices in other jurisdictions. We're willing to work with everyone in the community. We know government can make a difference if they're willing to act, if they are willing to lead. The Houston model offers an important best practice. We've brought a plan forward. Will the Premier support our agenda of ending chronic homelessness in Winnipeg? And did she raise this important topic in her meeting with Scott Gillingham today?
The Honourable First Minister.
Well, I thank the Leader of the Opposition for the question. I do want to congratulate Scott Gillingham, the Mayor-elect for the City of Winnipeg, on his new position. And I look forward to working, and we look forward to working collaboratively with him as we work through some of these challenging issues. Yes, I did in fact raise the Downtown Community Safety Partnership, as well as some of the challenges that we're facing, and I can tell you we will work very collaboratively toward that. We are focused on, we've also announced more RAM clinics. We're focused on recovery, getting people off of their addictions, and so they can recover that way. We have also, we're the government that brought in 100 new recovery beds. That's something that didn't exist under the previous NDP government. So we'll continue to take this kind of action, Mr. Deputy Speaker. We will not take an ideological approach like the members opposite.
The Honourable Member for Union Station.
Harm reduction.
Deputy Speaker, the state of healthcare staffing in our province is dire. Doctors Manitoba released a report yesterday that stated that Manitoba has the lowest number of family physicians per capita in Canada and the third lowest number of specialists per capita. To make matters worse, over the next 3 years, 43% of physicians are planning on retiring, reducing their hours, or leaving Manitoba altogether. Urgent action is needed to reverse these trends. Will the minister outline what actions she's taking to recruit and retain doctors in Manitoba?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker, and I thank the member for Union Station for the question because it gives me an opportunity to remind members opposite about their record on doctors. Over the NDP's 17 years in power, Manitoba dropped, Mr. Deputy Speaker, from the 4th highest physician number per capita to the 8th in Canada. That is their record. With regard to what we are doing, we're listening to the front lines, Mr. Deputy Speaker. That is why I was out in Portage-la Prairie to be part of the Rural Doctors Summit, to listen to Doctors Manitoba, to listen to the physicians that were in the room. The best solutions were in that room.
The Honourable Minister's time has expired. The Honourable Member for Union Station on a follow-up question.
The Doctors Manitoba report found that 2/3 of physicians are experiencing distress and half are experiencing high levels of burnout. Doctors Manitoba has stated that burnout is the largest threat to retention, and I quote, "The root causes of burnout are largely system issues, not due to a lack of resilience," end quote. We know the PC's cuts have created a healthcare system that does not work for Manitobans nor staff. The minister could reverse her government's cuts and create a healthy working environment for doctors. Will she do so today?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker, and I reiterate that over the NDP's 17 years in power, Manitoba dropped from the 4th highest physician number per capita to the 8th in Canada, Mr. Deputy Speaker. And what are we doing? We're listening to the frontline physicians. Dr. Thompson stated in his press conference that he agrees with the direction our government is taking in terms of listening to the front lines, and that this issue is not unique just to Manitoba. It's being felt across the country. We will continue to listen to Manitoba physicians, accept their report, look at their recommendations, and do what the members opposite never did, and that is to implement and make changes.
The Honourable Member for Union Station on a final supplementary.
Deputy Speaker, the shortage of doctors in Manitoba will get even worse unless urgent, immediate action is taken. Manitoba needs 359 physicians just to meet the Canadian per capita average, yet 348 physicians are considering retirement in the next 3 years. Hundreds more are planning on leaving Manitoba or reducing their clinical hours. We know the PCs have caused chaos in our healthcare system. We know the former Minister of Health has still yet to apologize for accusing doctors of all kinds of things in our healthcare system. Those accusations, their cuts, are leading to higher levels of stress and burnout. The minister should take action to reverse her government's cuts and create a healthy working environment in our healthcare
Member's
system.
time has expired. The Honourable Minister of Health. The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I have been working with the Health Human Resource Task Force in my department, as well as Shared Health Recruitment Group, and we will be rolling out a comprehensive action plan in the next few weeks to address recruitment, retention, and training. But I do want to highlight for Manitobans who may be viewing question period today that the members opposite voted against many health initiatives, making Trikafta available to cystic fibrosis patients 6 and up. They voted against making cochlear implants upgrades available to seniors, voted against providing insulin pumps and glucose monitors to young adults, voted against adding 26 inpatient monitor beds.
The Honourable Minister's time has expired. The Honourable Member for St. Vital.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, every week my office receives more and more complaints from students about their issues they're facing with Manitoba Student Aid. Students have faced extreme delays in accessing the funding they need to go to school. This has resulted in students having to pay out of pocket, go into debt, because they're not receiving the funding before the payment deadlines. Their debt is detrimental to students who are already struggling with the rising cost of living. So, the minister should take action urgently to help these students in need. Will he take that action today?
The Honourable Minister of Advanced Education, Skills and Immigration.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Let me share with the House that during 2021-22, Manitoba Student Aid provided approximately $217 million in both federal and provincial student loans, grants, and bursaries, including $51.9 million in Manitoba student loans and $19.1 million in Manitoba bursaries to help post-secondary students receive a high-quality education in Manitoba. The financial supports that our government provides these students will help them not only receive a quality education, but gain the right skills, talent, and knowledge to stimulate our growing Manitoba economy. We're working with post-secondary institutions to help students who are waiting. Thank you, Madam Speaker. Mr. Deputy Speaker.
The Honourable Member for St. Vital.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, it's clear the minister isn't working to resolve these issues that Manitoban students are facing with student aid, and it's simply unacceptable. I wrote to the minister months ago and have raised this issue multiple times. That's why it's so disappointing to hear that students are still unable to access Manitoba student aid that they are eligible for. Students who have contacted my office say that that these streaming delays are causing them to think about dropping out of school. The minister needs to take action. He needs to resolve these problems. He needs to help students. Will he do so today?
The Honourable Minister of Advanced Education, Skills and Immigration.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, staff continue to work hard to process applications and field inquiries so that students can focus on their studies each semester. Last year, Manitoba Student Aid provided over $33 million in scholarships and bursaries, which helped over 16,000 students finance their post-secondary education. Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker.
The Honourable Member for St. Vital on a final supplementary.
Students rely on Manitoba Student Aid to attend post-secondary. But these persistent issues that they face week in, week out, year in, year out with this government are growing tiresome for students who need this money. They are facing issues like slow turnaround time, poor performing websites, inadequate phone support, and general lack of organization is simply unacceptable. We've reached out to the minister's office and he has not taken action. Will the minister commit to fixing these issues with Manitoba Student Aid today?
The Honourable Minister of Advanced Education, Skills and Immigration.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Our government is providing students with record levels of financial supports in the form of scholarships, bursaries, and loans, unlike the previous NDP government who took no interest in the financial well-being of post-secondary students. Our government is still fixing the mess left by the former NDP government and the $15 million waste they produced with the non-functioning Manitoba Student Aid system that didn't allow students to log into the system, resulting in application delays and backlogs. The NDP's plan is tax students to the max, which in no turn makes life less affordable to students. Mr. Deputy Speaker, we're cleaning up the mess. We're taking action for their mess. Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker.
The Honourable Member for St. John's.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Manitoba Crown attorneys have been operating under challenging circumstances during the pandemic. They are facing burnout, chronic staffing shortages, high vacancy, and an unsustainable workload. This is a direct result of the PC government's incessant need to cut to save a couple of pennies off the backs of Manitobans. Deputy Speaker, this needs to change. So I asked the minister, will he reverse his government's cuts to prosecution services in Manitoba today?
The Honourable Minister of Justice.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, there are no cuts, but there is a vacancy rate of about 7%, which absolutely needs to be addressed. There is recruitment going on when it comes to Crown attorneys, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I know there's a labor issue as well that I won't get into because I won't interfere in a labor issue, but I do know that it's important for Crowns, it's important for all Manitobans that we are ensuring that our communities are safe. That's why Manitoba led the effort to have changes to the criminal code to ensure that bail provisions would change. When we spoke to ministers of justice across the country, they agreed with us. They said there needs to be tougher bail to ensure that those who are dangerous offenders and who are charged with dangerous offenses aren't released. I wonder why the member opposite won't support us in that call.
The Honourable Member for St. John's.
Since 2016, the number of those working in the legal positions in prosecution services has been dramatically cut. There are less, according to the own minister's annual report, dropping from 2,004 in 2016 to 188 in 2022. Crown attorneys are sounding the alarm regarding unacceptably high vacancy rates and the potential for mistakes due to overworked staff. It's time to reverse these cuts. Will the minister commit to doing so today?
The Honourable Minister of Justice.
There are no cuts, Mr. Deputy Speaker, but there is recruitment going on when it comes to Crown attorneys, Mr. Deputy Speaker. However, another mistake is a mistake that the federal Liberal government made in 2019 when they brought in Bill 75, which changed bail provisions. And it may have been unintended consequences, Mr. Deputy Speaker, but there's still real consequences. There are dangerous offenders who are charged with violent offenses in our community who continue to get released on bail because it's impossible for Crown attorneys to argue against that bail because of Bill 75. I know that the Federal Minister of Justice said he's going to look at that and what unintended consequences have happened, but I would hope that the NDP would join us in that support. They've been silent on these issues, Mr. Deputy Speaker. They don't want to talk about ensuring our communities get safer. They'd rather talk about defending the police. I hope they change their mind, Mr.
Honourable
Deputy Speaker.
Minister's time has expired. The Honourable Member for St. John's.
So back to Crown attorneys, Deputy Speaker. They are working excessive hours. They don't have adequate time to prepare for the volume of cases that they're presented. Vacancy rates are too high. Staff are burning out. Crown prosecutors warn the integrity of the justice system presented by the current staffing crisis demands a response. And we agree on this side of the House. Unfortunately, the minister keeps skirting around the issue. The minister must reverse the cuts to Crown prosecution.
Order.
The minister must reverse the cuts to Crown prosecution services. Will he commit to doing so today?
The Honourable Minister of Justice.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, I've already indicated there are no cuts and there's recruitment going on for Crown attorneys, but the member wants to talk about the integrity of the justice system. Integrity is ensuring that violent offenders who are accused of violent offenses don't get released back into our community to create another victim, Mr. Deputy Speaker. That the NDP won't talk about. When we went and talked to other attorney generals across Canada, they said they agree with Manitoba's position. In fact, they signed a letter, and the key signature on this letter was the NDP Attorney General in British Columbia, which commended Manitoba for their effort to change their criminal code. If the NDP in British Columbia get it, why is it that this NDP opposition can't understand we need to make our communities safer? And I'll table that letter for the member to read and understand.
Order. The Honourable Member for Kiiwetinoong.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Earlier this year, the Auditor General determined that the PC government failed to live up to their legal, and I'll say again, legal responsibility to implement a reconciliation strategy here in Manitoba. The AG found that the PCs have no strategy for reconciliation and no plan for when they may implement one. One aspect of a reconciliation strategy is a duty to consult framework. 6 months after this report was released, we still haven't heard anything on when we might see a duty to consult framework implemented. Can the minister tell us what day he will put forward a duty to consult framework for Manitoba?
The Honourable Minister of Indigenous Reconciliation and Northern Relations.
Well, I thank the member for the question. But before I answer that question, I think it's I'll take this opportunity to congratulate the newly elected Grand Chief of the Assembly of Manitoba Chiefs. This was truly a historic moment yesterday. The newly elected Grand Chief, Kathy Merrick, is the first woman elected to the AMC as Grand Chief. And I would also like to take a moment to thank all candidates who ran in the election. A total of 7 candidates let their names stand on the ballot. This took courage and dedication. Each candidate worked very hard on their campaign. You all brought a wealth of knowledge and depth of background for consideration as Grand Chief, and I know the decisions made at the meeting could not have been easy.
The Honourable Minister's time has expired. The Honourable Member for Kiwatanuk.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker, and also congratulations to the Grand Chief, Kathy Merrick, on her election. But at the same time, she's wondering these same questions and these answers to these same questions, Mr. Deputy Speaker. It's been 6 years since the Path to Reconciliation Act was passed, yet despite the act requiring the PCs to implement a reconciliation strategy, it seems they have made no progress. In fact, the AG found that the PCs have no strategy and no plan for when it may be implemented. The AG said, and I quote, "Without a strategy, efforts toward reconciliation are hampered, ultimately lacking focus and vision," end quote. The PC government should fulfill their legal responsibility, and again, legal responsibility, and implement a reconciliation strategy. Can the minister provide a date for when his government will implement this?
The member's time has expired. The Honourable Minister of Indigenous Reconciliation and Northern Relations.
Well, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I've traveled to many First Nations communities. I've listened to them tell me their stories. And I have been told that under the former NDP government, they were never heard, they were never listened to. That is why we are determined to create a duty to consult framework that works for First Nations communities. Mr. Deputy Speaker, our government is taking action and will ensure this is done right.
That's right.
The Honourable Member for Kiwatanuk on a final supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. And all this consultation, yet he's underspent that consultation budget by 42%, so I find that a little mystifying. We know that former Premier Brian Pallister did not take reconciliation seriously. During his 5 years as Premier, he failed to implement a reconciliation strategy despite a legal, and again, I'll say legal responsibility to do so. Yet the current Premier has also failed to implement a reconciliation strategy a year after she took over as leader. At this point, it's unclear whether the PCs will ever implement a reconciliation strategy and a duty to consult framework. Can the minister outline a timeline for when his government plans on implementing a reconciliation strategy here in Manitoba?
The Honourable Minister of Indigenous Reconciliation and Northern Relations.
Again, I will tell the member opposite, our government is taking action. We are committed to working with First Nations on this and advancing shared goals and promoting truth and reconciliation. We are doing this by carrying out respectful and productive consultations and listening to the concerns of Indigenous peoples across the province. And I look forward to our continued commitment to work with our new acting Grand Chief of the Assembly of Manitoba Chiefs.
Order. The Honourable Member. The Honourable Member for St. Boniface.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. When we ask questions of the Premier or Health Minister about our health system, they often pass the buck to Shared Health or to the WRHA, who won't answer our questions either.
Order.
That's because while MLAs have committees to question the CEO and board chairs of Hydro, MPI, MLCC, and more, we don't ever have a committee to hear from the CEOs of board chairs of Shared Health or RHAs who spend $6 billion a year to run a healthcare system into the ground. We've introduced a bill that will require Shared Health to report to MLAs. Will the Premier and her government support our bill to let MLAs ask questions of the Shared Health CEO and board chair on the record at committee?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, I want to commend the leadership of Shared Health, all the CEOs across our service delivery organizations for the incredible work that they have been doing during a difficult time to ensure that the front line is able to provide Manitobans with the care that they need. We have a high regard on this side of the House for shared health leadership, as well as the leadership across the RHAs and Cancer Care Manitoba. We will continue to work with them. We will continue to ensure that they have the supports that they need to meet the needs of Manitobans in this province.
The honourable member for St. Boniface with a follow-up question.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Speaker. There are lots of questions we'd like to ask of shared health, but wait times, budgets, choices, outcomes, who's actually telling them what to do. We have questions about terrible wait times for procedures, deaths in ERs, pandemic blunders, the fact that there's long-term care homes are going uninspected, seniors being assaulted in long-term care and whistleblowers ignored, burnouts of nurses and doctors, and that's just the last 2 years. We don't know who is making the decisions on our healthcare that affect every single one of us. We don't know if it's the minister. We don't know if it's someone in shared health. Will the Premier and her government support this bill to ensure we can bring healthcare accountability back to the Legislature?
The Honourable Minister of Justice.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Speaker. The member opposite has a private member's bill before the House, and it will be considered the way all private members' bills are. But he knows full well that this government and all governments have methods of accountability. One is being demonstrated here in question period, another is being demonstrated in estimates this afternoon. There are various committees in different ways that governments and officials are questioned. If the member opposite has questions, he's delivering them to the floor of the House here, and he'll have other opportunities to deliver them as well, Mr. Deputy Speaker.
The honourable member for Tyndall Park.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. My constituent Lucy was a full-time nurse in China for 25 years. She worked in an English-speaking hospital in Singapore for a few years, moved to Canada in 2013, became a permanent resident, and worked as a nurse in Alberta for over 3 years. Then, Lucy got married, moved to Manitoba to be with her spouse, and is being told she is only allowed to work as a healthcare aide. Mr. Deputy Speaker, Lucy feels she is being forced to leave our province because this government isn't valuing her education or experience as a nurse. Credential recognition is much harder in Manitoba compared to other provinces. Why hasn't this issue already been resolved? Where is the urgency on this? And what will this government do to ensure we do not lose another qualified nurse?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Recognizing that over 17 years the NDP government did nothing to address the issue brought forward to the chamber by the member for Tyndall Park, our government took action. In July, I issued a compliance order to the College of Registered Nurses of Manitoba that addresses that very issue. Individuals who are registered and licensed in another Canadian jurisdiction and are practicing in good standing can now be registered and work here in Manitoba in our health system.
The honourable member for Portage La Prairie.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Earlier today, the Minister of Education and Early Childhood Learning announced at Red River College Polytech our government's robust tuition reimbursement program. Can the minister please share how our government is taking steps to reduce barriers for people wanting to enter the workforce and ensuring our government, our province, has the highest quality early childhood educators in the country?
The Honourable Minister of Education and Early Childhood Learning.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I'd like to thank my colleague for that great question. Yes, today, Mr. Deputy Speaker, alongside federal MP Mr. Terry Duguid and my great colleague, Minister of Education and Skills and Immigration, I had the pleasure of being at RRC Polytechnic, of announcing that our government is providing $4 million, $5,000 per student per school year for reimbursement to help with tuition-related costs of recognized early childhood learning educator programs right here in this great province of ours, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Over the last 20 years, Mr. Deputy Speaker, the opposition had not been listening to the
minister's time has expired. Order. Order. The honourable member for Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. The Thompson pool closed under this government and has sat closed since 2019. An announcement leading up to a by-election contained no timeline for construction. The news release claimed the project would cost $15 million, but in fact, it's going to cost many millions more. When will this project be built, and will this government commit to the shortfall in funding for the Thompson Aquatic Centre?
Why do you hate the North?
The Honourable Minister for Labour, Consumer Protection and Government Services.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Congratulations to Colleen Smook being re-elected as Mayor of Thompson. She has she's been great to work with, as is her council, and congratulations to the new council and all the others that have been elected across Manitoba. Mayor Smook has said that, Thompson has done a great job on how they're moving ahead here. Over $130 million in grants from various levels of government. They're working to get things done, Mr. Deputy Speaker.
The honourable member for Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. As a matter of fact, I've talked to Mayor Smook. She's the one who informed me that there's going to be an over $4 million shortfall and that the city of Thompson is struggling to find the money. She's asked me personally to ask this government for this shortfall in funding. So will this government increase their contributions and tell us when this project will be built?
The Honourable Minister of Labour, Consumer Protections and Government Services.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Well, we're pleased to work with municipalities all across the province, First Nations groups, and others in Manitoba with the federal government under the Investing in Canada Infrastructure Program. That was where this application went from the Mayor of Thompson and her council, Mr. Deputy Speaker. It was approved in Treasury Board and Manitoba, and it was approved in Treasury Board federally and advanced. The funds were advanced to the City of Thompson. The City of Thompson is the proponent of this project, Mr. Deputy Speaker.
Yep.
The honourable member for Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. As we know, the pandemic has caused increase in everything. Inflation, projects have gone over budget. And at the time when Thompson had put that request forward, it was within reason. But we know that costs have gone up. And so will this government commit to fully funding the Aquatic Centre in Thompson? It's that simple, yes or no?
Why do you hate the North, Red?
The Honourable Minister of Labour, Consumer Protections and Government Services.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Well, I was pleased to stand with the Chief of Barons River this morning and his council to announce further projects under the ISA program with our federal partners, $31.6 million to benefit Barons River and its surrounding areas, improvements to provincial and federal roads, upgrades to a water treatment plant, and a new arena and multi-purpose facility for the youth to make sure that they are engaged and they are active, Mr. Deputy Speaker. We won't do what the previous NDP government did, which was tell municipalities that they are advancing these applications and then pulling them at the last moment, as they did to many municipalities in Manitoba. Very disgusting, Mr. Deputy Speaker. We'll work with the City of Thompson and this pool will get built.
Here, here.
Time for oral questions has expired. Petitions. Oh, actually, just a second here. Maybe not the most formal Deputy Speaker ever, but I do want to acknowledge some students in the gallery. We have seated in the public gallery from St. Maurice School 28 grade 6 students. Is that you guys? Yeah, welcome here. Under the direction of Judy Pacheco. Did I say that right? I hope I did. So welcome here. This group is located in the constituency of the Honourable Member of Fort Garry. We welcome you to the Manitoba Legislature. Petitions. The Honourable Member for the Pas-Kamisak.
Thank you, Madam Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I wish to present the following petition to the Legislative Assembly. The background to this petition is as follows. Number one, Provincial Road number 224 serves Peguis First Nation, Fisher River Cree Nation, and surrounding communities. The road is in need of substantial repairs. Number two, the road has been in poor condition for years and has numerous potholes, uneven driving surfaces, and extremely narrow shoulders. Number three, due to population growth in the area, there has been increased vehicle and pedestrian use of Provincial Road 224. Number four, without repair, Provincial Road 224 will continue to pose a hazard to the many Manitobans who use it on a regular basis. And number five, concerned Manitobans are requesting that Provincial Road 224 be assessed and repaired urgently to improve safety for its users. We petition the Legislative Assembly of Manitoba as follows: to urge the Minister of Infrastructure to complete an assessment of Provincial Road 224 and implement the appropriate repairs using public funds as quickly as possible. This petition has been signed by many, many Manitobans.
The Honourable Member for Elmwood.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, I wish to present the following petition to the Legislative Assembly. The background of this petition is as follows. Number one, over 25,000 vehicles per day cross the Louise Bridge, which has served as a vital link for vehicular traffic between Northeast Winnipeg and the downtown for the last 110 years. Number two, the current structure will undoubtedly be declared unsafe in the next few years, as it has deteriorated extensively, becoming functionally obsolete, subject to more frequent unplanned repairs, and cannot be widened to accommodate future traffic capacity. Number three, as far back as 2008, the City of Winnipeg has studied where the new replacement bridge should be situated. Number four, after including the bridge replacement in the city's 5-year capital budget forecast in 2009, the new bridge became a short-term construction priority in the city's transportation master plan of 2011. Number five, city capital and budget plans identified replacement of the Louise Bridge on a site just east of the bridge and expropriated homes there on the south side of Nairn Highway in anticipation of a 2015 start. Number six, in 2014, the new city administration did not make use of available federal infrastructure funds. Number seven, the new Louise Bridge Committee began its campaign to demand a new bridge, and its surveys confirmed residents wanted a new bridge beside the current bridge, with the old bridge open for local traffic. Number eight, the NDP provincial government signaled its firm commitment to partner with the city on replacing the Louise Bridge in its 2015 throne speech. Unfortunately, provincial infrastructure initiatives such as the new Louise Bridge came to a halt with the election of the Progressive Conservative government in 2016. Number nine, more recently, the city tethered the Louise Bridge replacement issue to its new transportation master plan and Eastern Corridor project. Its recommendations have now identified the location of the new Louise Bridge to be placed just to the west of the current bridge, not to the east as originally proposed. Number 10, the city expropriation process has begun. The $6.35 million street upgrade of Nairn Avenue from Watt Street to the 111-year-old bridge is complete. Number 11, the new Premier has a duty to direct the provincial government to provide financial assistance to the city so it can complete this long overdue vital link to Northeast Winnipeg and Transcona. We petition the Legislative Assembly of Manitoba as follows. Number one, to urge the new Premier to financially assist the City of Winnipeg on building this 3-lane bridge in each direction, maintain this vital link between Northeast Winnipeg, Transcona, and the downtown. Number two, to urge the provincial government to recommend that the City of Winnipeg keep the old bridge fully open to traffic while the new bridge is under construction. Number three, to urge the provincial government to consider the feasibility of keeping it open for active transportation in the future. And this petition is signed by many, many Manitobans.
Are there any, the Honourable Member for River Heights.
Yeah. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I wish to present the following petition to the Legislative Assembly. The background to this petition is as follows. A hearing aid is a battery-powered electronic device designed to improve an individual's ability to perceive sound. Worn in or behind a person's ear, they make some sounds louder, helping people hear better when it's quiet and when it's noisy. People who suffer hearing loss, whether due to aging, illness, employment, or accident, not only lose the ability to communicate effectively with friends, family, or colleagues, they also can experience unemployment, social isolation, and struggles with mental health. Hearing loss can also impact the safety of an individual, with hearing loss as it affects the ability to hear cars coming, safety alarms, call 911, etc. A global commission on the state of the research for dementia care and prevention released an updated consensus report in July 2020, identifying 12 key risk factors for dementia and cognitive decline. The strongest risk factor was that was indicated was hearing loss. It was calculated that up to 8% of the total number of dementia cases could potentially be avoided with management of hearing loss. Hearing aids are therefore essential to the mental health and well-being of Manitobans, especially to those at significant risk of dementia, Alzheimer's, a disorder of the brain affecting cognition in the ever-growing senior population. Audiologists are healthcare professionals who help patients decide which kind of hearing aid will work best for them, based on the type of hearing loss, patient's age, and ability to manage small devices, lifestyle, and ability to afford. The cost of hearing aids can be prohibitive to many Manitobans depending on their income and circumstances. Hearing aids cost on average $995 to $4,000 per ear, and many professionals say the hearing aids only work at their best for 5 years. Manitoba residents under the age of 18 who require a hearing aid, as prescribed by an otolaryngologist or audiologist, will receive either an 80% reimbursement from Manitoba Health of a fixed amount for an analog device, up to a maximum of $500 per ear, or 80% of a fixed amount for a digital or analog programmable device, up to a maximum of $1,800. However, this reimbursement is not available to Manitobans who need the device who are over the age of 18, which will result in financial hardship for many young people entering the workforce, students, and families. In addition, seniors representing 14.3% of Manitoba's population are not eligible for reimbursement despite being the group most likely in need of a hearing aid. Most insurance companies only provide a minimal partial cost of a hearing aid, and many Manitobans, especially retired persons, old age pensioners, and other low-income earners do not have access to health insurance plans. The province of Quebec's Hearing Devices Program covers all costs related to hearing aids and assistive listening devices, including the purchase, repair, and replacement. Alberta offers subsidies to all seniors 65 and over and low-income adults once every 5 years. New Brunswick provides coverage for the purchase and maintenance not covered by other agencies or private health insurance plans, as well as assistance for those for whom the purchase would cause financial hardship. Manitobans over age 18 are only eligible for support for hearing aids if they're receiving employment and income assistance, and the reimbursement only provides a maximum of $500 a year. We petition the Legislative Assembly of Manitoba as follows. 1. To urge the provincial government to consider hearing loss as a medical treatment under Manitoba Health. 2. To urge the provincial government to provide income-based coverage for hearing aids to all who need them, as hearing has been proven to be essential to Manitobans' cognitive, mental, and social health and well-being. Signed by B. Wazelenko, Ken Machen, Louise Weens, and many other Manitobans.
Are there any other petitions? Seeing none, The Honourable Government House Leader.
Orders of the day.
Oh, my apologies. Grievances. Orders of the day. The Honourable Government House Leader.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I'd like to table for the House's information a revised sequence for consideration of departmental estimates. Thanks.
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Now, Mr. Deputy Speaker, with that piece of important business done, could you please resolve the House into Committee of Supply?
Certainly the House will resolve into Committee of Supply. Mr. Deputy Speaker, please take the chair. Will the Committee of Supply please come to order? This section of the Committee of Supply will now resume consideration of the estimates for the Department of Transportation and Infrastructure. At this time, we invite ministerial and opposition staff to enter the chamber, and we ask that members introduce the staff in attendance. As previously noted, questioning for this department will proceed in a global manner. The floor is open for questions. The Honourable Minister.
Yeah, right now, before we begin, I just want to tell you that my Deputy Minister, Sarah Teeley, will be joining us for as a staff member for the department.
Okay. Are there any further questions? Seeing none, we will proceed to the resolutions. Resolution 15.2. Resolved that there be granted to His Majesty a sum not exceeding $6,517,000 for transportation and infrastructure capital projects for the fiscal year ending March 31st, 2023. Shall the resolution pass? The resolution is accordingly passed.
Sign the resolution, please. Sign it. Thank you.
Resolution 15.3, resolved that there be granted to His Majesty a sum not exceeding $150,585,000 for transportation and infrastructure transportation operations for the fiscal year ending March 31st, 2023. Shall the resolution pass? The resolution is accordingly passed. Resolution 15.4, resolved that there be granted to His Majesty a sum not exceeding $31,464,000 for transportation and infrastructure, engineering and technical services for the fiscal year ending March 31st, 2023. Shall the resolution pass? The resolution is accordingly passed. Resolution 15.5, resolved that there be granted to His Majesty a sum not exceeding $9,528,000 for transportation and infrastructure emergency management for the fiscal year ending March 31st, 2023. Shall the resolution pass? The resolution is accordingly passed. Resolution 15.6, resolved that there be granted to His Majesty a sum not exceeding $614,459,000 for transportation and infrastructure capital assets for the fiscal year ending March 31st, 2023. Shall the resolution pass? The resolution is accordingly passed. The last item to be considered for the estimates of this department is item 15.1A, the minister's salary, contained in resolution 15.1. At this point, we request all ministerial and opposition staff leave the chamber for the consideration of this last item. The floor is open for questions.
Well, you can ask questions and if you can go straight to moving it.
The honourable member for Concordia.
I have no questions, but I would like to move a motion. I move that line item 15.1A be amended so that the Minister of Transportation and Infrastructure's salary be reduced to $21,000.
It has been moved by the honourable member for Concordia that line item 15.1A be amended so the Minister of Transportation and Infrastructure's salary be reduced to $21,000. The motion is in order, and it is a debatable motion. The honourable member for Concordia.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And I asked a number of questions throughout this estimates process that I think, quite genuinely were all questions that came to us from, from the community, from folks across this province. And, it is our role as His Majesty's loyal opposition to bring those forward. In the same way, it is the minister's responsibility, I believe, to respond to those questions in a forthright way. And I know that, as I mentioned, and I think in fact in my remarks during the questions, that everyone has a certain style. There's sort of certain back and forth when it comes to estimates. I thought in the last and previous estimates we've had a fairly good back and forth, understanding those limitations about what information is available at the minister's fingertips. I do think that it could be the technology, it could be the disconnect between not being in the chamber versus being in the chamber that created unnecessary friction. But I do think that the quality of the answers is severely lacking. And I know that there are many, this is not uncommon for ministers of the Crown to try to evade or to talk out the clock. But I guess I've just expressed my disappointment that this particular minister did that, because I don't think that's becoming of who he is and the way that I've seen him operate in the past. The issues that we brought forward were significant. We certainly always focus on safety first, and not least, among those concerns that we brought forward was Highway 6. And, the minister knows that there's a personal reason for all of us in this chamber to do better on Highway 6. So I implore him to take a fresh look at that and to listen to the concerns of the people in Thompson and the North who use that highway every day. It's just in the media again this week. And there are serious problems that could be, I think, could be addressed in a fairly straightforward way. So I hope that he does that. Likewise, we've talked about Highway 101. We've talked about Highway 210 and Highway 12. There are a number of places in this province that the infrastructure deficit that has crept up under this minister is having an impact, a real-world impact on the safety that people are experiencing on our highways. And we know that the overall vacancy challenges that his department is facing because of the cuts that they have undertaken is having an impact. And we're heading into another winter. We've already had the highest precipitation year on record here in Manitoba, and we're looking at probably another wet, snowy winter. We know that having safe highways needs to be our number one concern. So for those reasons, and for the fact that, as I said, we bring these forward in an honest way, and we ask that the minister take his responsibility in reaching out to communities across this province as well, that he take his job, not just to answer my questions, but to answer the questions of the people of Manitoba seriously. For all of those reasons, and probably some that I'm forgetting, but for those reasons in particular, I would suggest that the minister's salary be reduced in this case to $21,000, a generous amount, I must say.
Are there any further questions?
Or comments?
Or comments?
Any debate of the issue?
Or debate? The Honourable Minister.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. And I just wanted to, what the member from Concordia just basically stated on the record here, is that, you know what, I answered all his questions. He should know that when it comes to the Brandon decision that I made, he has to now study the Transportation and Infrastructure Act to see that the minister has the last opportunity to listen to everyone out there, including the community, the council, which even passed a resolution. And that guy and the member from Concordia should know they're the ones that actually stopped economic growth in rural Manitoba. But they took a lot of resources out of rural Manitoba, like oil. And the thing is, he should know better in his days that none of it ever came back to rural Manitoba. And what does he have against when it comes to City of Brandon in the Westman area? They took a lot of oil out during their days, but they never gave anything back to that area. So this is one reason why I ran for as an MLA. And then when it comes to Highway 6, we are investing over $51 million in the next 3 years to make Highway 6 safer by adding shoulders to the highway. Every time we do stretches of it, we are adding shoulders. We are also adding passing lanes. We're starting first in the southern part of Highway 6, but we'll be working towards passing lanes closer to Thompson. So I'm not quite sure. I've been answering every question that the member from Concordia has asked me, and I'm not quite sure what other answers he wants. These are direct answers, and the members should know that we're doing everything to invest back in these highways, which they had deficits of $1 billion in the last 8 years. If they wanted rest stops, they could have invested in it. If they wanted it safer on Highway 1 by the Trans-Canada Highway, they could have invested over $1 billion in making sure that the highway is divided. If they're concerned about the perimeter highway, which they don't want to take accesses out, he talks about one side about safety, but he allows the perimeter highway to be unsafe. So what is it? You want safety? It depends on who comes to him for complaints. So the thing is, we are investing. We are making sure that our budget is going to be invested in the next 3 years at $1.5 billion. So I'm going to leave it at that, Mr. Chair.
Are there any further questions or comments? Is the House ready for the question? The question before the House is the motion put forward by the Honourable Member for Concordia that line item 15.1A be amended so that the Minister of Transportation and Infrastructure's salary be reduced to $21,000. Is it the pleasure of the House to adopt? Is it the pleasure of the committee to adopt the motion? I hear a no. All those in favor of the motion, please say yay. Yay. All those opposed, please say nay. Nay. In my opinion, the nays have it. I declare the motion lost. The Honourable Member for Concordia?
On division, Mr. Chair.
On division. This completes the estimates of the Department of Transportation and Infrastructure.
No. Sorry, we have the resolution yet.
Oh.
The last resolution.
Back that up. Resolution 15.1, resolved that there be granted to His Majesty a sum not exceeding $11,610,000 for transportation and infrastructure corporate services for the fiscal year ending March 31st, 2023. Shall the resolution pass? The resolution is accordingly passed. Thank you. Now this completes the estimates of the Department of Transportation and Infrastructure. The next set of estimates to be considered by this section of the Committee of Supply is from the Department of Justice. Shall we briefly recess to allow the Minister and critics the opportunity to prepare for the commencement of the next department? Agreed and so ordered. We are now in recess. All right, will the Committee of Supply please come to order? This section of the Committee of Supply will now consider the estimates for the Department of Justice. Does the Honourable Minister have an opening statement?
I do.
The Honourable Minister.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Speaker and Mr. Chairperson. I know we'll have staff that will be joining us shortly, and I'll introduce them at that time. But I do want to say what an honor it is to be able to be here today as the Minister of Justice and deliver this opening statement. I look forward to hearing from my critic, the Honourable Member for St. John's, to hear her perspectives as well. I always really enjoy the estimates process. I find it a thoughtful process generally. Not that question period isn't thoughtful, but it's a different form and a different way of which questions are asked and answered. And I think that the estimates process allows both the critic to learn about the department and sometimes the minister as well. I think it's a shared learning exercise. And so I think it's one of the better parts of our legislative process that we have here in Manitoba. I would like to, before I introduce, of course, staff will be coming in, thank all of the staff within the Department of Justice for the work that they do. I've been minister now for not quite a year. I guess it'll be a year in January. And I've really been fortunate in my time in government to work with tremendous civil servants during my time in health and education, when I was responsible for advanced education, immigration, healthy living, seniors, during my time as Deputy Premier, and now as Minister of Justice and Attorney General. Really, really fortunate to work with just tremendous people. And they, I think, have really helped me in the roles that I have. And I always say that any mistakes are certainly mine, and any credit for the good things that happen are certainly theirs. I want to go a little bit beyond the staff within the department directly, though, and to thank, in particular, the legislative security staff who are under the Department of Justice. And we'll get into all the details about some of the challenges that have happened here in this building and the precinct in recent times. The member for St. John's may have questions about those sorts of things as well. But I think if we would disagree on some things, I don't think we would disagree on the good staff that we have here in the legislative building and the work that they do to help us, not just about keeping us safe. They're very involved with working with the public who are coming into the building for meetings or for tours and that sort of thing. And I know that they're very generally accommodating and welcoming to those who come to the Manitoba Legislature, which I've often said it's the people's house. Beyond that, I want to thank those who are in law enforcement in our community. You know, we've heard of some just really tragic situations in Ontario, in British Columbia, where police officers have lost their lives. And I know that all members of this House would echo the comments that we value the great work that the women and men in our law enforcement do, and the tragic losses that we've seen and seem to be escalating in terms of the number. Very, very concerning. When I've had the opportunity to attend graduations for police officers, Winnipeg Police Service most recently, you know, I always make mention of the families of those officers who also serve. They serve in a different way than their family members who are in the community enforcing laws, but they serve in a way that doesn't always get noticed. When your loved one is leaving your home in the morning, I know when I say goodbye to my son or my wife in the morning, they're not expecting me to be rushing into situations of danger. Where for our law enforcement, that's the case. When others are fleeing those situations, they're going into it. And they, of course, bear a special and unique burden for that, but their families do as well. And I just simply wanted to put that onto the record. Within the department, there's been lots that's been happening over the last a while, and I would certainly thank the former ministers of the department, the now current Minister of Finance,
the current Minister of Economic Growth and Development. I think I've got the department right. Economic Development, Investment and Trade. I'm corrected by the Minister of Advanced Education. And of course, the current Premier, who served in this role. And all of us, I think, benefit by the legacy of those who've come before us. And some of the work that was ongoing beforehand involved changes to the Police Services Act, and we continue that work now, really focused on police standards, really focused on police training. Of course, work's been done on the IEU, and I know the member for St. John's has some history there, and she shared some of her own ideas with me, and I've appreciated hearing her perspective on that. And so that's really important work that is happening. But members will know, and I think all Manitobans know, the concern that's happening when it comes to violent crime in Manitoba, but really across Canada. Something has changed over the last 2 years, and there's lots of those who I'm sure will analyze this at some point and try to make some determination about why that is. But without question, there's more violent crime happening across Canada in every province. And I heard that very distinctly from ministers of justice and attorney generals who met a couple of weeks ago at their annual meeting, which hasn't been held in person for a while, but was at that time. Every province, and it didn't matter which jurisdiction or which political party is in power, all had the same concerns and raised those concerns. Now, of course, there's provincial responsibility when it comes to certain things, and I'm happy to both take that responsibility and answer questions that come about that. But it is a shared responsibility, as the federal government is responsible for the criminal code. And so we as a province have taken the lead in raising some suggestions for changes to the criminal code when it comes to bail. As an example, reversing the bail on violent acts using a bladed or an edged weapon. Very well received in the minister's meetings from all provinces. I shared earlier today a letter signed by a number of provinces that I gave to the member for St. John's. Probably hasn't had a chance to look at it yet, but we may discuss it at some point. And those are the sort of concerns that are being raised and the sort of asks from the federal government in terms of changes to the criminal code. Now, in fairness, Minister Lametti did say that the Liberal changes regarding bail and Bill C-75, I'm going off memory, but I think it was C-75 in 2019, may have had unintended consequences and may have changed, even though they would say that they were codifying what was already a charter or a principle from common law, codifying that, but they did agree that there might be unintended consequences there. Maybe it's gone too far. So far, in fact, that our prosecutors would say it's virtually impossible to deny or to even ask for the denial of bail on virtually any crime unless it's involving a gun or some other limited circumstances. And so our request is to look to broaden that. Now, of course, that doesn't mean that bail would be denied in a case of a knife, for example, if the criminal code was changed. But it would mean that there'd be an opportunity to properly argue that in certain cases, an individual is not best placed in the community while they're awaiting trial. Those might still be relatively rare circumstances, but the opportunity to make that argument on behalf of public safety, I think, is very important. So I hope that the member opposite has some questions along those directions in the time that we have. I'm not sure how much time we'll have. It won't be days, I suppose, because we only have 20-some hours left in the entire estimates process, but it'll be quality time, if not quantity time. And I look forward to those types of questions, even on difficult subjects like violent crime. But if we don't talk about these things, then I think we're denying the reality of what people are feeling in the community. And I don't think we should not talk about these things because they're difficult things to talk about. I still think we have a responsibility as elected officials, and I have responsibility as a minister responsible for this file to speak about these things, to make suggestions, and then to come forward with solutions where those solutions fall within the purview and the jurisdiction of the provincial government. So with those few words, Mr. Chairperson, I look forward to hearing from the honourable member for St. John's, my co-house leader, and to the discussion that will happen over the next little while.
We thank the Minister for those comments. Does the official opposition critic have any opening comments? The honourable member for St. John's.
Miigwech, Chairperson. So I would reiterate some of what the Minister for Justice has shared, and I look forward to the discussion for justice estimates. I know that the Minister was very anxious to get to justice estimates, so here we are today. I'm sure that we'll have a good discussion on some of the things that need to be discussed. Like the Minister, I want to acknowledge some folks. So, and I agree with the Minister, and the Minister and I have had a couple of discussions about, security at the Ledge and what we've seen in the last couple of years. And as I've shared a couple of times in the chamber, I've personally faced and experienced some of those exponential interactions with folks in the last couple of years. And so to that end, I do, is he allowed to be in here yet? No, sorry, Rylan. Soon. Just, sorry. So I do want to reiterate some of the speaking of security, I want to thank security, all of the security staff who keep us safe in this building, and certainly I do have an enormous amount of respect for Nicole and have a good working relationship with her. I think she does her job very well. I think she is very capable and has a very unique set of skills that allows for resolution to issues that may arise in a non-confrontational way. And so I do want to really just acknowledge her. I want to acknowledge justice staff as well, and I mean that in the totality of that is the enormity of justice. I think that everybody recalls when the pandemic first was here, and we had certainly a lot of issues and a lot of concerns and a lot of fears and a lot of things to kind of navigate all over, but certainly one of the things that I think that stands out for me the most is within the correctional facilities. And that was an enormous amount of logistics to be able to keep people safe. Now, of course, do I agree with the direction that came down from, the maybe perhaps the Minister? All of the direction? No, obviously not. But what I do appreciate is the attention and the care to make sure that people were safe. Of course, we perhaps disagree in the way that it did happen, but people deserve to be safe at work as well. And they had an enormous responsibility to keep folks, citizens who are housed in correctional facilities, safe as well. And of course, we know that often that was done with, not necessarily the best PPE. So I want to acknowledge all of the justice staff that have had to navigate, the court system and, youth, corrections and all of those. I think that it's been a lot for folks. I want to acknowledge also the folks that are in the communities that also in their very important way, in their own unique way, tried to help folks that were struggling in the communities. And I'm sure that the Minister would agree as well, that we've got some pretty significant stakeholders or players in that. And so, of course, we can talk about Mama Bear Clan and Bear Clan that were out on the streets every single day trying to ensure that community was safe, that people were safe, that people had food. When so many things were closed, these folks, just everyday, normal, caring, compassionate Manitobans, went out on our Winnipeg streets and actually all across Manitoba to make sure that people were taken care of. And that's an extraordinary testament of compassion and love for community. And so I acknowledge them as well. And I actually want to give a particular shout out to a woman who's like a sister from another mister, Gina Smoke, who is, I don't know what her current title is, but she's with Unifor, and she's like the Indigenous liaison or something. And her group did like extraordinary work at the height of the pandemic. Like they were cooking, you know, full meals, like, you know, at least 2-3 nights a week, and going out and feeding our relatives who were unsheltered. And she organized all of these women who came together, and often they used their own money to feed the community. Sometimes they get donations, but most of the time it was their own money. And going down along the water to make sure that our relatives that are in the camps were fed, that they had things during the winters, and they did such extraordinary work. And I love Gina so much, so I want to just acknowledge her as well. And then I want to acknowledge Cora Morgan. So Cora Morgan is currently the Assembly of Manitoba Chiefs First Nation family advocate. She's been there for the last 7 years. In fact, she's the one that has started it and has grown it to where it is today. And, you know, she was part of this cohort along with, you know, Spatch, if you know who Spatch is, and other folks in the community, including Gina, who got together and envisioned Nadinamak, which is at 190 Disraeli. And I've been there several times, and it's a safe place for folks that are unsheltered. And it's a loving space for people that are unsheltered. And Cora, you know, she was the one that went and bought all of the beds, all of the blankets, all of the pillows, all of the clothes, shampoos, like everything. She did all of that. And I think she did it within like a couple of days. And again, that's really a testament to that commitment and that love for our communities. And again, you know, I don't want to say that is the model that we should now then think that it's okay for our relatives to be housed. We have to do, you know, everybody deserves to have folks, everybody deserves to have housing. Safe housing, adequate housing, a place to call their own. And so I do acknowledge her for the work and pulling all of that together, because I do agree with the minister, like the last 2.5 years, I think all of us, you know, there has been just an extraordinary amount of struggle and hurt, and, you know, with services that were typically open then were closed, and then things weren't back to full capacity, and it's just created just these huge gaps in protections and services that people really rely on. And people are struggling. People are really, really, really struggling. Families are struggling. People are struggling. People with mental health issues are struggling. People with addictions are struggling. Families with family members with addictions are struggling. Like it's just been a really, really difficult 2.5 years. And I would submit to the House that everybody feels that, everybody in some way, maybe in your own family, in your own community, but everybody I would imagine really feels, or certainly would bear witness to that struggle that we're seeing. And so of course, you know, the next several hours discussion is important in the sense that, of course, justice is one component of that. It's not the whole component. In fact, I would argue that, you know, a lot of these, the system within the justice comes after the fact. right? It's downstream, and we really do need to be looking at those things upstream and what are the conditions that we should put in place, what are the resources that we should put in place for folks, so that, you know, we don't have folks that who are struggling and become in conflict with the law, and then we know what that path looks like for, you know, and I used to say it when I was the Director of Justice for the Southern Chiefs Organization, and we said it many, many times. Once you get involved, you become in conflict with the law, that's often years and years and years until you're out of that. And often you're in conflict with the law because of those struggles that we're seeing with people right now. So I look forward to our discussion for the next couple of hours.
The honourable member's time has expired. We thank the critic from the official opposition for those remarks. Under Manitoba practice, debate on the minister's salary is the last item considered for a department. Accordingly, we shall now defer consideration of line item 4.1, subsection A, contained in resolution 4.1. At this time, we invite ministerial and opposition staff to enter the chamber, and I would ask the minister and critic to please introduce the staff in attendance. Would the Honourable Minister like to introduce his staff? The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson. I'd like to introduce, not in order of importance, but going from my left to my right, the extraordinary Deputy Minister of Justice, Dave Wright. I'd like to introduce the brilliant Chief of Staff and Special Assistant, Marty McNichol, and the very diligent and detailed ADM, Assistant Deputy Minister for Corporate and Strategic Services in the Department of Justice, Maria Campos.
We thank the Minister of Justice for those introductions. Would the critic wish to introduce their staff? The Honourable Member for St. John's.
This is Rylan Nares, who is the legislative researcher and assistant to the opposition House Leader, who is the eager Rylan, who is going to be helping me here today.
We thank the critic for those introductions, enthusiastic introductions all around, only to make for a more exciting committee, I'm sure. In accordance with sub-rule 78, subsection 16, during the consideration of departmental estimates, questioning for each department shall proceed in a global manner with questions put on the resolutions. Once the official opposition critic indicates that questioning has concluded. The floor now is open for questions. Are there any questions? Well, the Honourable Member for St. John's.
Which, can the minister undertake to give a list of all technical appointments in his department, including names and titles?
The Honourable Minister.
We'll undertake to do so and report back to the member in the time allocated by the rules.
The Honourable Member for St. John's.
Can the minister undertake to give an organizational chart that lists all employees and program areas?
Honourable Minister.
We will take such an undertaking.
The Honourable Member for St. John's.
Can the minister give a list of all current vacancies in the department?
The Honourable Minister.
Yes.
The Honourable Member for St. John's.
Can the minister provide a list and title of all of the Indigenous, Black, and person of color working in the department?
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson. Just confirming with staff, not entirely sure the way in which we delineate that, or if there's any sort of other sort of issues around privacy with that, but we will, I'll say to the member, I'll investigate that and see what's possible.
The Honourable Member from St. John's.
Yeah, I asked that question because it's an important question, right? It's an important question to explore how much BIPOC folks are hired within certainly the department, because I never see any, whenever we have estimates or anything like that, I never see any BIPOC people ever. And so, you know, when you think about justice, one could argue that there should be BIPOC people working within justice. That, you know, and interestingly enough, I bring that up because actually the letter that the minister provided during QP, which I did read, I read almost right away. And I found really interesting that here was a letter from, you know, all of these different ministers and deputy ministers or whatever it was from 4 different provinces. And in the second paragraph of this letter, who I don't know who drafted up this letter, but I do want to read it for the purposes. So, you know, dear minister, thank you, da-da-da. We have heard clearly from our provincial and territorial counterparts that this is a significant concern in urban and rural communities. While we recognize and support the goal of reducing the over-incarceration of Indigenous people and marginalized communities, recent changes in federal law and Supreme Court decisions have had unintended consequences, making it extremely difficult to hold violent offenders in custody while they are awaiting trial. That's literally pretty much the first paragraph. And so here's this letter that's gone to the federal minister. And what this letter does is that it situates Indigenous people and marginalized communities as being violent. I think that is so incredibly offensive, so incredibly dangerous. And to be honest, I don't know why the minister was so proud to give this letter to me, as if this letter was saying something progressive or important. Actually, what this letter is doing is it's constructing and it's affirming all of those racist tropes of Indigenous people and marginalized people, i.e. Black people and people of color, as being intrinsically and inherently violent. And in fact, that language is used throughout this letter. Nowhere in this letter do we hear about non-BIPOC people being violent. This letter, from the very get-go, situates and affirms those racist tropes of Indigenous people and people of color and Black people. It is actually quite anti-Indigenous and anti-Black and anti-persons of color. So I know that the minister is very proud of this letter. I think that this is highly problematic. So, to go back to my question, when I only see non-BIPOC people in positions of power, in positions of management, like here today, and I can't get an answer on how many BIPOC people are actually employed in the Justice Department, and I'm sure that there is. I imagine that there's BIPOC people. I would have to imagine. It's important that there are BIPOC people hired in these positions, because it is all of you that are making the laws and the decisions and the policies that impact on the very communities that you're writing the federal minister to do more about. I actually think this letter is incredibly offensive and, as I said, very dangerous.
The Honourable Minister of Justice.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Chairperson. So the letter that the member is referencing is one that was written by British Columbia, currently an NDP government. I don't spend a lot of time defending NDP governments, but I'm going to spend a little bit of time here because the member referred to the NDP government in British Columbia as racist. And I think that that's concerning. Not again because they're my political party. I don't say that, but I do think that we have to hold ourselves to a higher level, generally as politicians, because we talked a bit about the challenges and the division that exist in society today, and that's caused for a lot of different reasons. But I do think the language that politicians use, and the members was referencing language that was written by the British Columbia government in the letter, is important. So I'm not critical that she's raised the issue of language. I think we can all learn from different things, but to suggest that the NDP government in British Columbia is racist, I guess I'm just concerned with that, and it troubles me a little bit. And I'll take that back. I'll mention that to my colleagues in British Columbia, how the NDP feel about them here, and I won't do that with any joy. I'll say this to the member. It'll hurt me, actually, in many ways, to have to make that call and to say what the member has said about the NDP government in British Columbia. But I'll do it because I think it's important. It's important to try to learn about a better way to have discourse. So I've made the commitment that I'll speak to the NDP in British Columbia and let them know that the member opposite feels that they're a racist government. I don't feel that way, by the way. For the record, I don't feel that way, but I know the member opposite does. I think what they were trying to convey in the letter, though, is that there is overrepresentation in the justice system of the groups that they've identified, that there is over-incarceration. That's actually not something that I don't think is controversial, and the federal Liberal government has talked about that. I think most NDP governments and most ministers of justice have talked about that. Now, maybe that the member opposite doesn't feel that way and feels that those incarceration numbers are fair and representative. But, I mean, I'll let her sort of defend that if that's how she feels. But the NDP government in British Columbia and the officials who wrote the letter, who the member opposite feels are racist, we're expressing the concerns, I think, of ministers of justice across the country. And the concerns expressed in the letter is that violent crime is going up. It's undeniable. You simply have to look at the newspapers, you simply have to look at the news, and that they were hoping that the federal Liberal government would recognize that some of the changes that they've made through Bill 75 and others have maybe had unintended consequences. Those were actually the words used by the Minister Lametti, that there may have been unintended consequences, which I thought was good of him to say, because it was a recognition that it may not have been intentional, but that maybe things had happened that were not well crafted, or maybe just, and it happens with legislation sometimes. My deputy for many years was involved with drafting legislation, and we would often talk about the unintended consequences of legislation. So I appreciated the fact that Minister Lametti acknowledged that. I appreciate the fact that British Columbia spearheaded this letter, despite the fact that the member opposite feels that they're a racist government. I do think that it was important to have those words expressed to the federal government, and I'm disappointed that the member opposite feels so badly about their colleagues in BC, but I will certainly pass that on to them.
The honourable member from St. John's.
I mean, the minister can try to spin and twist what I'm saying as much as he wants. It's all good. He can do that. That's, and I find it, typical that when an Indigenous person tries to raise concern about the language that is used in such an important letter to federal ministers signed by other ministers from 4 different jurisdictions, then the Indigenous member is chastised on, on the language that I'm using. So that's typical. That's typical what happens when you try to bring out the fact that this is language used in here that is constructing Indigenous peoples and marginalized peoples as violent and as the only ones that we need to be dealing with here in the purpose of the letter. So I'm good. The minister can do and spin however he chooses. That's his prerogative. But I'll bring it back to the original question. And the minister, I don't think the minister answered if he's going to provide me with the list and number, even percentage, but again, you know, of those BIPOC folks that are working in justice, but again, to lay out those that are actually in management, middle management positions, those folks that actually have some decision-making capacity. And because, I mean, the minister just said that, you know, his folks are the ones that draft that legislation. And again, that is the material point here, is that if BIPOC folks, if Indigenous, Black, and people of color are not involved in any of that, that's where we get into the issues of unintended consequences. And that truly is, you know, a very important discussion that I would hope that the minister would undertake and take seriously. And so, is the Justice Minister deeply involved with the awarding of general patient air transport services?
The Honourable Minister of Justice.
Yeah, I thank the member for the question. I want to be clear because it's important. I mean, member sort of made some accusations against me, and she knows. I actually have great respect for the member for St. John's. We've worked together now for some time as House leaders. We have different roles now as minister and critic, and but I think we've actually worked well together as House leaders. Not that we've agreed on everything, but I believe that I've treated her with respect, and I've generally felt the same back in terms of a reciprocal relationship with the member opposite. And sometimes the thing that's not always understood, Mr. Chairperson, that question period is one thing and the debate that happens between members is one thing, but this House only operates where there is that sort of cooperation on a whole host of things that the public never sees and that often happen behind the scenes. So it's important to me and my ongoing positive relationship with the member opposite that she understands clearly my own feelings on this. And you know, if I'm wrong, I would, I think I would go and tell her that I was wrong. But when I review Hansard tomorrow, and I often review Hansard the day after to see what members have said, because I'm just generally interested in the things that members say. If I would review Hansard, I'm pretty sure the member opposite said that she found the letter to be racist, and the letter was written by representatives, officials in British Columbia. So if somehow those two things aren't true, I certainly know one is true, and I believe that the first one is true, and I'll review Hansard, then the member is taking offense not to my words, but to her own words. And I'll leave that for her to reflect upon. I do want to say, though, that I know our department, and led by our deputy, before I was there, you know, we're taking significant efforts when it came to ensuring that there was exactly the diversity, not of views, but it results in a diversity of views, but a diversity of individuals who are in the Department of Justice. Because just like the police will say sometimes, that it's important that the police forces reflect the diversity of those with whom they police. We would also say in the Department of Justice that diversity is important. And so I've heard this actually from leaders in the Indigenous community, that they very much appreciate the efforts that were taken by the Department of Justice. And by the way, because I don't want a member to misconstrue this and think that I'm somehow pumping up my own political tires on this, this happened before I was Minister of Justice, and I would give credit to the Deputy Minister and the officials within the department for taking the efforts to ensure that Indigenous voices were not only working in the department, had significant influence in the department, but there are actually actions taken within the department that reflected that. And I think that if the member opposite, my friend from St. John's, were to take time to speak to Indigenous leaders in the province of Manitoba, as I know that she does, but specifically ask about some of those efforts. Don't get me wrong, I'm sure they would say there's other things that can be done. That's the nature of the business that we're in, that our work is never done. But I think she would find that there has been significant steps taken over the last number of years to ensure that those voices are at the table, that they're in leadership roles, that their suggestions are not just being heard but being acted upon where they can be acted upon. And I can give a list of those actions to the member opposite. It might take me longer than the hour and 20 minutes that we have remaining today, but we have all day tomorrow and maybe all next week perhaps to do that. So I think it's important that I both say that the member herself put words on the record that I think needed to be highlighted. Were not my words, and that the department has taken significant efforts. In fact, if she looks, I think, at our estimates book at page 28, she'll find the result of some of those efforts. And not that that's done, and that's the totality of the efforts. Of course, always more work to do, and nobody's suggesting that we've achieved all that we want to achieve. But I wouldn't be doing my job as a minister if I didn't clearly show the member opposite the significant steps that the leadership within our department have taken, separate and apart from whomever the Minister of Justice has been over the last few years.
The honourable member from St. John's.
I'll reiterate my last question. Is the Justice Minister deeply involved in the awarding of general patient air transport services?
The Honourable Minister of Justice.
Well, maybe the member wants to define deeply involved. I mean, I suppose, as ministers, we sign cabinet submissions and Treasury Board submissions. Is she asking if I'm inspecting planes, or like what is her definition of deeply involved?
The Honourable Member from St. John's.
Let me just word it a different way. What is the Justice Minister's involvement with the awarding of general patient air transport services?
The Honourable Minister of Justice.
My understanding in talking to officials is contracts such as the one the member is talking about go through an RFP, a request for proposal. A proponent is selected, that gets funding authority, I suppose, through the funding authorities of government, and then gets approved through the normal process of government. But there was an RFP involved, so I would suggest that my involvement is minimal, if not close to none.
The Honourable Member from St. John's.
The department recently undertook a review of the province's contract for general patient air transport services. What were the results of this review, and are we getting value for that money?
The Honourable Minister of Justice.
My understanding in talking to officials is that we transport court officials and those who are involved in the justice system, not patients. I think I may have used to been responsible for that a few years ago in a different portfolio, but I think those are more appropriately directed to the Department of Health.
The Honourable Member from St. John's.
Yeah, you know what, that's my mistake. That is actually what I'm discussing here. I don't know why I put patient in there. I apologize. So I am talking about court officials and folks that are presently incarcerated. So I'm talking about that infrastructure. Why?
The Honorable Minister of Justice.
Yeah, I thank the member for that that clarification. I was wondering if I was flashing back to Health Minister days, but the contract that the member is referring to, while it's true that the planes transport those who are involved in the justice system and those who are in the court system, as she mentioned, or those who are working in the court system, the contract is actually administered and issued after an RFP from the Department of Labor, not the Department of Justice.
The Honorable Member from St. John's.
I'm curious for today to see where we are at in respect of citizens who are presently incarcerated. So what I'm looking for is in all of the correctional facilities, what the capacity is and what the current levels are today.
The Honorable Minister of Justice.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairperson. I thank the member for the question. I do have those numbers here, and I'll read them by facility, recognizing that they change, of course, day to day, if not, well, maybe not hour by hour, but certainly day by day. So this is as of this morning, and they'll be relevant as of this morning, but might change as of tomorrow. The Brandon Correctional Center, the rated capacity, so the rated number of beds is 252, and as of this morning, there were 292 individuals who were incarcerated in the facility. The Headingley Correctional Center is rated for 549 individuals, and as of this morning, there was 547 individuals in custody. The MRCC Manitoba Remand Center, Milner Ridge, is rated as a capacity of 524. At Milner Ridge this morning, there was 431 individuals. At the Paw Correctional Center, there was, the rated capacity is 114. As of this morning, it's 162 individuals. At the Women's Correctional Center, the rated capacity is 196. This morning there was 200 individuals. At the Remand Center across the street, the rated capacity is 289, and as of this morning there was 202 individuals. At the Manitoba Youth Center, the rated capacity is 150 youth, and as of this morning, there were 84 who were in custody. Thank you.
The honourable member from St. John's.
Can the minister provide a further breakdown of how, obviously not for the women's, but for how many women and men are in each, minus the women's? Can you do it?
The honourable member from St. John's.
Where it's appropriate, can the minister break down those citizens, those female and male, and maybe perhaps gender diverse folks that are in each of them, where it's appropriate?
The Honourable Minister of Justice.
Yeah, I hope that I'm answering the right question that the member asked. If not, she'll ask it again, I'm sure, and correct me. Brandon Correctional Center, there are 286 males who are housed as of this morning, and there are 6 females. Sorry, it's not broken down in any other way. We'd have to do a different analysis, but I'll give you what I have in terms of male and female. At Headingley, of course, they are all male who are incarcerated. In the PAW, there are 155 male incarcerated and 7 females. At the Women's Correctional Center, there is 1 male and 199 females. And at the Remand Center, there are 188 males and 14 females as of this morning. And then at the Manitoba Youth Center, as of this morning, there are 69 males and 15 females. Got that right?
The Honourable Member from St. John's.
Thanks, that's exactly what I was asking. I'm confused, though, about the women's correctional facility. That's it.
The Honourable Member, the Honourable Minister of Justice.
If the member's confused about the 1 male, I'm confused too, and we'll find out.
The Honourable Member from St. John's.
I wonder, and I just put this on the radar, if it is, I would imagine, again, not knowing anything, I would imagine that perhaps it's somebody who is I don't know, actually. I don't know. So if I could get an answer on that, that would be great. So in respect of those correctional facilities that are over capacity as of today, so we've got Brandon, the PAW, Women's, what is the plan, or how is that addressed in respect of the overcapacity of those particular facilities right now?
Honorable Minister of Justice.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairperson. So important to remember, it's not a, didn't run the numbers right off my head, but it's not a system overcapacity. I think there's still excess capacity in the system, but sometimes it's just a matter of it being kind of a transient sort of overcapacity for a variety of reasons at any given time. And then officials indicate as well that the rated capacity is the rated capacity when a facility is opened or had significant, I guess, changes made to it. But sometimes there are other changes made within a facility that aren't as significant in terms of construction or reconstruction, but that still allow for more individuals to be there. But the rated capacity, it doesn't change. So it may very well be that there's actual appropriate space available, but that the rated capacity doesn't reflect that. But again, it's not a system overcapacity, so sometimes it's just a moment in time as well.
The Honourable Member from St. John's.
So one of the things that I'm sure the minister is well aware is that there have been several different organizations and different programming that have tried to get into some of our correctional facilities. And I'll give an example. So the John Howard Society has a literacy program. They haven't been able to get into the remand since the start of COVID. And I've heard from, in fact, several women, Indigenous women, arguing or trying to figure out how they can get in for some of their programming as well in the women's correctional facility, but that in general, they haven't been able to get into some of the facilities to do programming since the beginning of the pandemic. And so I think the worry and the concern and the narrative that I'm hearing is that the pandemic, obviously at the beginning, it was important to keep, citizens and staff safe, but that with the lack of restrictions anywhere else, why is there, and actually even to further break it down, is which facilities are allowing outside groups to come in and do programming. Because like I said, the remand, so the John Howard Society isn't able to get in to the remand.
The Honourable Minister of Justice.
So I've visited some of the facilities and certainly have heard about programming that's happening in facilities. The member opposite, raises specifically the John Howard Society and then references that there might be others. That's something I'd be, very interested in looking into. We've made note of the John Howard Society. If there are others the member wants to share, no question. Obviously, during the worst of the COVID situation, there was lots of reasons why accessing, virtually every facility in society, let alone a correctional center, was difficult. But when people are living in close quarters, for sure. But I'd want to look a little bit further into it if there's something in particular that's happened or that's happening that's preventing that. But I would share the same, I think, opinion of the member opposite, that programming like literacy programming or other programs within correctional facilities are important where they can be offered and can be offered safely. So we'll look into the particular issue on John Howard Society, and if the member opposite wants to share other specific examples she has, we'd look into that as well, because I don't think we're misaligned in terms of seeing the value of those programs where they can be offered.
Honourable Member from St. John's.
Can the minister give an update? I know that the minister closed Agassiz Youth Centre, and I'm curious about the commitment to the healing program that was shared at that time. Can the minister give an overall update in respect of all of that?
The Honourable Minister of Justice.
Yeah, I thank the member for the question. It's really a good question, actually. We saw with the numbers that I provided her a little bit earlier on the number of youth currently at the youth center in Winnipeg out on or near Kenniston Boulevard that still a significant available capacity there in terms of what his rated capacity is, and I think that not only justifies that use of space, and don't take that to mean that I agree with everything in the Youth Criminal Justice Act, but the reality is that the Federal Youth Criminal Justice Act has changed incarceration numbers of youth, and I'm sure in many ways appropriately, and in many other ways where there might be discussions about it, but it has definitely changed the number of youth in custody across the country, so it made sense to close the Agassiz Youth Center, and I think the numbers shared today confirm that. But she raises a very good point, that it wasn't just about closing a facility, that we wanted to ensure that there was additional resources then that were added into the system, and one of those was the Healing Lodge in Thompson that was announced at the time together with MKO and Grand Chief Garrison Satie. We made the announcement together, and I think that is the first healing lodge in the Manitoba justice system that was announced for Thompson. We've announced a couple of others in facility since then, but I think it was a first for Manitoba, and very well received by MKO and their leadership. And because of the nature of that facility being a healing lodge, obviously having significant Indigenous programming, as it should be, led by Indigenous leadership, as it should be, and a member has spoken about the importance of that earlier in the questions today. It is MKO that is the lead in the establishment of the Healing Lodge. My understanding from officials is that they've identified and I believe secured land in Thompson. And so we look forward to hearing more about that. And I'd invite the member opposite. Perhaps we'll both find ourselves in Thompson at some time, and we can tour it when it's open, because it's important, and it's important to explain to folks what it is and what it isn't, because sometimes there's misconceptions about that, and those misconceptions can cause problems when it comes to how people view and value the healing lodges. But looking forward to MKO's update in terms of how they're progressing on that.
The Honourable Member from St. John's.
So, well, two things, but I'll concentrate on this first question. So, because the minister had talked about the closure of Agassiz included, and to quote his words, additional resources. So one of them is this Healing Lodge. I would like a little bit more details in respect of the Healing Lodge. Is there a time frame that you know of? What was the government's financial commitment to the Healing Lodge? And what's the timeline to have the Healing Lodge up and running?
The Honourable Minister of Justice.
Thanks, Mr. Chairperson. I mean, at the highest level, and I appreciate the questions on this important initiative. At the announcement, $2 million of capital was committed to MKO and $1 million of operating. In terms of the timeline, I'd want to check with MKO to see where they're at. I mean, I know they'll be developing programming, and obviously securing the land is an important part of what they need to do, but the programming will be the most important part once the facility is established. But in terms of the high level of investment, and not to say that there won't be more investment, but of course, before one can do more, you have to have the building and then make an initial operating commitment. So those were the initial commitments to that particular facility. I mentioned that there were other healing lodges that were announced for the Brandon Correctional Center and for the PAW as well. And those were announced about a month ago or so. But that particular one in Thompson had a $2 million capital investment and a $1 million operating investment at the outset. I should mention as well that Mayor Colleen Smook was also very, very supportive of that initiative, came to the announcement. It was held, I think, at the MKO headquarters or office here in Winnipeg, and Mayor Smook made the trip down from Thompson to that announcement. It was just incredibly supportive, and I will echo the comments that were made earlier in this House and congratulate her on her re-election as mayor.
The honourable member from St. John's.
Can the minister, and of course Agassiz is now closed, but I would imagine that the minister would still have access to information on what the Agassiz Youth Centre would cost per fiscal year. So in its totality, so salaries, operations, programming, what would those costs have looked like?
The Honourable Minister of Justice.
We'll endeavor to get that for the member.
The Honourable Member from St. John's.
So in his first response, when I asked this question on Agassiz Youth Centre, the minister had advised that there were additional resources that were also identified in the closure of Agassiz Youth Centre. What are those additional resources?
The Honourable Minister of Justice.
I'm not sure if I'm understanding the question correctly. There are additional resources at Agassiz, which is now closed. If she's asking about what additional efforts we're taking beyond the Thompson Healing Center, identified a couple of others when it came to the healing lodges in the PAW and the healing lodges in Brandon. I'm sure she'll hear of more initiatives in the days and months to come, but certainly those three healing lodges, two which are in a facility and one which is more of a probably combined open and closed custody facility in Thompson, are significant. Not only are they the first, well, they're certainly the first in Manitoba, those three. I think they're among the first in Canada when it comes to youth, but it recognizes, I think, very much to go back to what the member opposite was saying at the beginning of the estimates process, and ensuring that the voices around the table are speaking to the experiences of those who have different experiences than myself or others. And I think those are very reasonable points. And some of what we have been informed by those who have different lived experiences are the importance of culturally appropriate supports in facility and out of facility, and so that would include the healing lodges. Of course, we've also provided support for wraparound services for youth, recently announced with Marymount in the city of Winnipeg, but it will involve youth in Thompson, and there'll be, of course, more announcements to come. So significant resources being announced. But I also want to say that that's not a reason to close AYC. The resources are being used now in different ways, but the closure of the Agassiz Youth Centre was simply looking at the numbers and recognizing that with the Youth Criminal Justice Act that exists in Canada, and not a lot of prospect of that changing, that in a way that would change the incarceration numbers for youth, not putting a value on whether or not it should change or not, but just the reality of it not changing. It didn't make a lot of sense to have two facilities that were operating at below 50%, well below 50% capacity, when we could use resources in a way where there were communities asking for resources.
The honourable member for St. John's.
To be clear, when the minister had spoke initially about the closure of Agassiz, and he had said the additional resources. So the additional resources that we're talking about is the Thompson / Northern Healing Lodge, the Paw Healing Lodge, Brandon Healing Lodge, wraparound services for Marymount, and Marymount will be going in the north, I'm assuming. That's what the minister was referring to?
The Honourable Minister of Justice.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson. Well, I've been referring to a lot of different ways which we're investing in culturally appropriate and supportive programming, but the member should stay tuned, I'm sure, for more announcements that I'm sure that she'll support.
The honourable member for St. John's.
How many male residents presently incarcerated have spent time in solitary confinement? And I guess I'm specifically looking for numbers for fiscal years, or for years 2019, 2020, 2020/21, and 2021/22. And then, of course, I'll be asking, so I'll save that time, I'll be asking that for women as well.
The Honourable Minister of Justice.
And for both of those, we'd have to endeavor to see what information we have on that.
The honourable member for St. John's.
I know the minister was very excited about estimates, but almost all of the questions I've asked so far, the minister is endeavoring to find those answers. So I would have thought that the minister would have had those available. I guess what is the, and I in respect of that question that I just asked, what was the longest period that a citizen spent time in solitary confinement, again, over the last 3 years?
The Honourable Minister of Justice.
Well, I was and am very excited for estimates. A lot of that is just because I want to hear what the priorities of the member for St. John's is. That means a lot to me, to hear what your priorities are and how you feel about different sorts of things. I take that very seriously. But of course, member will also know that a department of hundreds of millions of dollars, we don't have every answer immediately here, but as I've indicated, and we will endeavor to get a response to her where that information is available. So I don't want her to take my responses in terms of endeavoring to get her answers, as the rules allow for in this House, to be anything to dampen the enthusiasm that I have for the estimates process.
The honourable member for St. John's.
So to be clear, while the minister is trying to find that information, so what I'm specifically asking for is how many male residents spent time, and again, and this is for each of these categories, for the 2019, 2020, 2020, 21, 2021, 22. So how many male residents spent time in solitary confinement, how many female residents spent time in solitary confinement for the exact same years. And again, I would also ask for those categories of citizens who may be gender diverse or non-binary or two-spirited, so I'm asking for that. And then also for youth, as I'm sure the minister is well aware, there is a push from Macy to remove the ability to have youth spend any time in for lack of a better word, solitary confinement. So also for youth, for both male and female and gender diverse folks.
The Honourable Minister of Justice.
Yeah, I thank the member for the clarification in terms of the requests, and certainly, again, similar when I don't know how, when it comes to some of the specific categories that she's mentioned, I don't know to what extent that can be identified, but to the extent we can provide information, we will endeavor to do so, and do so within the timeframes that are set out in our rules.
The Honourable Member for St. John's.
I referred a little bit earlier about programming or access to citizens currently incarcerated and having access to programming. I am curious right now about the programming that is available to women and gender diverse folks who are currently incarcerated. And I would probably specify that specifically for the women's correctional facility.
The Honourable Minister.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairperson. We don't have it broken down by facility. We may be able to get that in a longer period of time, but we do have a number of the programs. And I'll run through some of them in the time that I have. I will mention before that, I think the member was suggesting, although I don't know if she said it on the record, about why there might be one male incarcerated at Women's Correctional Center. It's an individual who is transgendered, and so that is the one individual who was identified as a male at the Women's Correctional Center. In terms of her question regarding programming, number of programs, Thinking Awareness Group program designed to provide participants with an introduction to the concept of cognitive behavior therapy, Reclaiming Our Identity, which is a self-awareness program that promotes personal growth and identity through education of the historical impacts of colonization, discrimination, racism, and the residential school system. I won't go through the full description of the program, but I'm sure we could always provide that if the member wants. Informational anger management programming, end to aggression programming, introduction to health relationships, Making a Connection program, which is an intervention for offenders who've been charged with intimate partner violence, Reclaiming Your Self-Expression program, which is an evidence-based cognitive behavioral program designed to help female participants avoid further assaultive and/or aggressive behavior by understanding how the way we think affects how we feel and ultimately affects our actions, which can lead to aggressive behavior. Healthy Options for Personal Empowerment is another program. The Marshall Sexual Offender Program, Sex Offender Program, Unit Program at 225 Gary Street. It's a Coming to Terms Program, which is a short-term informational program that assists participants to realistically evaluate their alcohol and or drug use and the effect that it's having on their lives and the lives of those around them. A behavioral therapy program. The 4R program is a skilled-based program that promotes healthy relationships, targets violence, risky sexual behavior, and substance use among adolescents. Creating New Choices program. It is a program for anger management program that explores the cost of using anger and aggression. Helping Women Recover program provides a gender-responsive treatment for women who abuse alcohol and or other drugs, integrates treatment or substance abuse with issues of trauma. And I think I'm having a bit of, figured out the technology issues. The Nobody's Perfect program, which I suppose could be applied to all of us, it's a facilitated informational program designed to meet the needs of parents who are young, single, socially or geographically isolated. My Tween and Me program is a facilitated group program that provides participants with the knowledge, tools, and support they need during a child's transition to adolescence. program of self-discovery and empowerment for girls, trauma-informed curriculum that uses a variety of therapeutic approaches, including psychoeducational, cognitive behavior, expressive arts, and relationship therapy. The Winding River Therapeutic Community, of course, this is the WRTC program for those in custody at Headingley Correctional Centers, and continues in the community for individuals on probation. This, I believe, is the therapeutic drug program, which I think has been very well received, and something I remember talking about as a critic back when I was a young man, and I'm glad to see that it's come to fruition. I think it might have been the current Minister of Finance who opened that program, and so I commend him for that. There's a therapeutic community at the Winnipeg, or it's Women's Correctional Center as well. I think that'll be similar. And there's many more programs that I'm about to run out of time, but that's a sampling of the programs that are offered in facility.
The member for St. John's.
So many questions, so little time here. I want to ask about, particularly after the last 2.5 years, what supports the government specifically is doing to support women leaving correctional facilities. We know that housing is a critical issue right now, with housing stock or social housing stock critically low. And so that is typically a very huge, it's a huge barrier for women and citizens in general when they're leaving correctional facilities, but often it is attached to them getting children back or trying to get into, whatever kind of schooling or training. So specifically, what type of supports is the government resourcing for women leaving correctional facilities?
Minister.
And I've actually spoken a bit about this, so I think the member and I share a common feeling about the importance of the connections that are made, leaving facility, but those often start when an individual is in facility. And it's a particular challenge in a provincial context, of course, because those who are in a provincial correctional facility are there for 2 years less a day for sure, but usually a much shorter time than that. And so there's not a lot of time whether it comes to training or other sort of connections that one can make, but that doesn't mean, and I listed off a series of programs in the last answer, that we don't take those efforts and we don't make those efforts. And so just as a more recent examples, I'm sure there's many more, but they come top of mind because they're more recent, and as I get older, my memory is only good for more recent events. But when I think about the Healing Lodge that we're going to be establishing in Brandon, the one in the Paw, that connects individuals who are in facility to those who are in the community at that time. But the hope really is that when they leave the facility, that connection continues. Because we know that if an individual leaves a facility and there are no supports, they haven't made appropriate connections within a facility, they're likely or more likely to return to a lifestyle they otherwise would have. I spoke earlier about the wraparound program that Marymount is running, and that very much is about helping individuals, youth in this case, but they would be women as well, to transition into a more productive way, and that's often high risk. Youth, high-risk women offenders, male offenders, but to connect them into a community. And so the member will know, but others might not who are reading Hansard, that wraparound truly means reaching into the community for psychological support, for health support, for sometimes financial support, for work-related support, and all of those supports come around an individual to provide truly the ability to properly transition back into the community from what otherwise would have been a criminal lifestyle. No, that doesn't work for everybody, but we know it works for many people, and many more people than if none of those supports exist. So I think part of the question that the member was asking, which is a good question, probably relates a little bit to the Department of Families as well, and to other other departments in terms of housing support and those sorts of things. But I wanted to give her those examples because they're the most recent examples of initiatives that the government is taking, and there'll be more examples in the days and months to come.
The honourable member for St. John's.
I'm going to spend a little bit of time on courts here. Can the minister list the court offices and vacancies at each office?
The honourable minister.
I think the court offices are on the website, but we can endeavor to get to the vacancies as they exist.
The honourable member for St. John's.
I want to read the minister a letter that was shared with me today in respect of the PAW court office. We are writing to you to express our concerns with respect to the operation of the PAW court office. Specifically, for the past 2 years, there has been an extreme staffing shortage and lack of resources provided to our office, our court office, that has resulted in significant prejudice to our clients. Lately, it seems that the court office is closed as frequently as it is open, if not more frequently. This renders us unable to file court documents on our clients' behalves, creating a complete lack of access to justice. Additionally, there have been filing materials that have been lost at the hands of the court office, and there has been paperwork that has been misplaced, or rather simply not completed. This has resulted in clients being brought into custody for breach of conditions that they are no longer bound by, therefore infringing on their rights afforded to them pursuant to Section 7 of the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. These issues impact our clients in the PAW Manitoba, as well as our clients in surrounding communities such as Moose Lake, Easterville, Grand Rapids, and Puckatawagan, where there are already access to justice concerns. It is disheartening that an individual living in northern Manitoba should be afforded less access to the courts simply due to their geographic location, and that this amount of time has lapsed without anything being done to rectify the situation. We have advised the court office and the Law Society of our concerns. However, to date, nothing has been done to rectify any of these issues. We hope that with your attention to the matter, we can ensure that our court office obtains the resources it requires in order to operate efficiently. I share that because that was a letter that was sent to my colleague, the member for the PAW Kamizak, and she shared it with me today, trying to draw attention from the minister to what is really a violation of folks in the north and their access to justice and to speedy justice, and not to be penalized for things that are beyond their control. And so I do think that it is very concerning to hear that citizens are having are being breached for things that are well beyond their control, but that are actually the control of the minister and all of the folks who work for you. So again, I'm asking about court offices and what the minister is doing to deal with the extreme, and I quote again, extreme staffing shortages and lack of resources provided to our court office. End quote. So that's specifically about the PAW, but I would submit to the minister that that's a concern that we've heard from several court offices across the province.
The Honourable Minister.
I do appreciate the member raising the issue. I suspect the letter has probably been copied to our office, and so I'm sure there's a response that's being developed to the specific writer of the letter. But the more general concern is not an inappropriate concern to raise. I think you start at the level of what society generally is facing when it comes to the ability to fill certain positions. Very difficult in really almost every sector. And for whatever reason, it's worse after the last 2 years, and there were challenges even before that, but for whatever reason, it's worse over the last couple of years. I sometimes hear employers say to me, where did all the workers go? And I don't have an easy answer for them. But then overlaid on top of that, of course, is the difficulty that has often been in terms of recruiting for those working in the North. And I can't always explain that. I've had the opportunity to visit the North many times, wonderful people in wonderful country, but there is a reality that it is a challenge sometimes to fill positions, whether it is in business, whether it's in education. I experienced that in terms of teachers in the North, of course, well documented about healthcare workers in the North, and that's not a political statement, because it was challenging when the NDP were in government. Teresa Oswald would tell me that. Sharon Blady would tell me that. The former ministers of education, whether it was Peter Bjornson or other ministers, would talk about the difficulties sometimes in filling those positions in the North. So that's a long-standing challenge. I know, for example, sometimes even filling positions when it comes to judicial justices of the peace or judges or justices, it can be difficult in the North, and those are often very well sought out positions from those who are in the legal profession, or maybe in the case of JGPs in other places in societies. So that doesn't diminish the concerns that were raised by the author of the letter or by the member herself who raised this. It just brings context to the challenges that every government and every non-government entity faces sometimes in recruiting to the North. Having said that, I do know that the department understands those challenges, has been taking initiatives to try to recruit and to fill positions in the best way that they can. I can assure the member that it's not for lack of interest or lack of trying or lack of resources when it comes to the finances to fill those positions. It is a challenge, though, it's because of the historical challenges in those positions. But we'll endeavor to look further into the letter that the member has put onto the record, and that I suspect has already made its way to our office.
The honourable member for St. John's.
The minister is talking that he's saying that it's very difficult to recruit, and of course everybody knows that that's an issue right now, but there's a fundamental difference between if you can't fill a position at a restaurant or at a movie theater or at a clothing boutique. There's a fundamental difference in not being able to fill that position and where perhaps there's going to be some folks that are working more and have to do more shifts versus not being able to have the infrastructure to exercise justice. And certainly there's a fundamental difference when in that not being able to fully exercise justice, people, and often the most marginalized people, are being penalized because of that. And so, I understand that, there is, and I understand that that's a long-standing issue in respect of trying to recruit folks to work in the North, and certainly the pandemic has left folks with challenge, but that doesn't diminish the urgency to have folks working in courts, because again, it is impacting on the most marginalized and putting them more into contact and more into conflict with the overall justice system. So what specifically is the minister or the department doing to address the vacancies within the courts? And then, of course, I haven't even, we haven't even begun to ask the questions in respect of Crown prosecutions, which, of course, we asked that in QP today,
And then certainly the minister would have received or seen that letter that was sent out yesterday from Crown prosecutors. So what is the department actually doing to rectify that? And before the minister does that, I just want to table the letter for the minister that I just read into the record. Miigwech.
The Honourable Minister.
Yeah, thanks very much, Mr. Chairperson, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I want to, just be clear. I'm not trying to draw a moral equivalency between vacancies that exist in one sector versus vacancies that exist in another sector. They're different problems, but they're all problems. And it's a problem that is generally being faced in society and that has been specifically faced in northern communities long before this government came to government. And for however long this government remains in government, whether it's 10 years or 20 years, I suspect that challenge is going to remain for a lot of reasons that are simply not within the control of any government. But I can assure the member that whether it's Crown attorneys, where there is a vigorous recruitment effort underway for, or whether it's positions in the north, there are significant recruitment efforts that are always undertaken in trying to determine where there are individuals who can fill those positions, and not only fill them, but hopefully stay in those positions. Because I know in previous roles, we sometimes were successful in getting individuals to fill a position. I'll use healthcare as an example because I was in that file for about 3 years, but they wouldn't stay very long, and that became a challenge into of itself, because individuals within a community would find that they draw a connection with somebody who's filling a position, and then not long after they're gone and those connections are lost. And it was almost as disruptive as before they went into those positions. So the department is very actively engaged with the strategy and trying to ensure that they can not only fill those positions, but try to find people who are interested in living and becoming part of the communities in which they're filling those positions.
The Honourable Member for St. John's.
So, again, I don't know if I know that the minister talked about recruitment efforts, but I don't know if there was any specifics in that. So I'll ask it in respect of like Crown prosecutions, because I know he did mention, and again, I quote that there's recruitment efforts going on. But so in respect of Crown prosecution, prosecutors, there's a significant vacancy, and there's been the alarm has been raised by Crown prosecutors in respect of them being able to do their job, the jobs that they're hired for, which contributes, obviously, is one of the cogs within the justice system. And so I know that the minister during QP kept trying to say that there were no cuts or to positions. So I'm curious what the department is doing in respect of Crown prosecutors, and whether or not the minister and the department is taking seriously the letter that was sent out yesterday that raises some serious concerns to the overall justice program. So specifically, what's the minister and the department doing about Crown prosecutions, and what are specifically those recruitment efforts?
The Honourable Minister.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairperson. Absolutely, it's being taken seriously. And without being political, because I don't like to be political, but I remember, I think, sitting in the seat, might be this exact same seat the member opposite is sitting in right now, in 2006, and asking those same questions when the Crown prosecutors were filing complaints about the working conditions within the Department of Justice at that time. And I don't recall, I don't know if I made it a political issue. I was younger and sometimes more aggressive in those days than I am today. But I think I'd like to think I'm more magnanimous. Is with age and that sort of thing. My wife tells me that I should try to look at every side of the issue. Well, it works out okay some days and not so well other days. But I know that in 2006, when this was an issue, I'd like to think that the minister at the time, it may have been Minister McIntosh, also took it seriously. But I think that speaks to the fact that there are times when it is more difficult for a variety of reasons to recruit into certain positions. I think there are currently around 15 or so vacant positions when it comes to the Crown attorneys, and that would equate to about an 8% vacancy rate. That's too high, and it's not intentional, it's not desirable. And so, obviously it's a relatively confined pool of individuals who can be Crown attorneys because they have to have fulfilled certain professional standards and educational standards, but whether it's, trying to at the, I don't want to say the lowest level, but at the most entry level, and speaking to those who are graduating from law school and who are looking for articling positions, and I know that articling positions are offered within prosecutions, and many of those articling students have continued on in prosecutions, or speaking more broadly to those who have been or are currently at the bar and been called to the bar for many years and trying to recruit those positions. So I know that those active recruitment efforts are happening within the legal profession, a relatively contained group of individuals in Manitoba. It's not for a lack of desire or a lack of effort or a lack of willingness to have those positions filled. Now, I will also say that the member will know that there are active labor negotiations happening now. And so to the extent that some of these concerns drift into the area of labor negotiations, I won't speak to those. I mean, the process of labor negotiation and contract negotiation happens in an independent way without interference, or it should. I mean, I can cite examples in I could cite examples in this House where previous governments have interfered in labor disputes, but then I'd be becoming political again, and then I'd go home and my wife would tell me to stop doing that. So I won't, but I won't drift into areas of labor negotiation if that's where the member's heading.
The honourable member for St. John's.
I'm going to move on to the IIU. Can the minister provide an update on the makeup of the unit? So specifically, what are the positions that are currently there? Are all the positions filled? And then what is the gender breakdown of those positions?
The honourable minister.
We'll endeavour to get the information for the member. I can't, when she's asking for questions around gender and that, I think I'm not sure how comfortable we are providing every piece of information on certain things and to make sure we're doing it in a right and appropriate way. But we will certainly look to get the information on the positions that are available and those that may be vacant.
The honourable member for St. John's.
So I was also specifically asking about the positions as they exist right now. Like, what's the complement of the IIU? And so I imagine you guys must have that. And then I'll add to that how many of the current investigators are Indigenous.
The Honourable Minister.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairperson. If my honourable friend would draw her attention to page 46 of the estimates book, she'll find that the number of FTEs, the number of positions within the IIU is 15. We'll endeavor to get the vacancy rate, and I know she's asked a more specific question about identity, and we'll see what information we have on that.
The Honourable Member for St. John's.
What is the minister doing to add non-formal or non-former law enforcement members as investigators to the IIU?
The Honourable Minister.
You know, it's a long-standing issue, and I remember sitting on the couch in the loge over there with the former Minister of Justice, Dave Chomiak, right below Solon, the lawmaker, and having that discussion about this. And at the time when he was creating the IAU, and I think that the member for St. John's may have been working for the government at the time, you know, he was pretty adamant that it needed to be law enforcement officials who were seconded or I think otherwise deployed into the IIU. And I question that about, not because I question the law enforcement officials themselves, but whether or not that would be perceived as being a conflict. And Mr. Chomiak at the time, I think, made a pretty impassioned and I think compelling argument that at the startup of this, that it would be difficult to find individuals who had the training to do that kind of work and to receive the sort of evidence that needed to be received and to conform to the law to receive that evidence if they weren't law enforcement officials. And so I didn't make that a political issue. I supported the decision, and the member opposite may have, if she was employed at the government at the time, may have also supported that decision. But of course, we've taken further steps now to move this into retired officers, that officers who are not currently within a force but still have the skills. But that doesn't mean that that those who have never been in law enforcement, you know, there wouldn't be discussions about how at some point to ensure that that those individuals can be more fully utilized and maybe at a broader complement. But I recognize the challenge that Mr. Chomiak, by the way, who I have great respect for, and I think we developed in a similar way with the member opposite. He was also the House Leader for the NDP, and I was his critic, and he was the Minister of Justice, and you know, so we played a similar role to the way the member for St. John's and I do, and we had a good relationship, and I took them both at his word, and I think what he said was right. It's difficult to find people who don't have some background in law enforcement to have those sort of investigative skills and to be able to discern evidence in an appropriate way. But I also believe, as I believed then, that having individuals who are active members of law enforcement causes that potential for concern over conflict of interest, which is why changes have been made.
The Honourable Member for St. John's.
And so to clarify, I wasn't working for the government at the time. I was the Director of Justice for the Southern Chiefs Organization, and I participated in that process of the changes to the Police Act and the development of the IIU as a representative of 36 Southern First Nations. So just to put that directly on the record there. So one of the things that was recently that came about was the director of Indigenous and Community Relations. So I'd like an update on where that's at in respect to the IIU and who's been hired in that position. There was a lot of discussion or debate in the House that the director of Indigenous and Communities Relations should be Indigenous. And so I am curious to see what's happened with that position, whether or not somebody's been hired and who exactly that is.
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, and I want to thank the member for correcting my mistake on suggesting she was employed in government. I knew that she'd had some role, and I would say a significant role in the crafting of the IIU originally. And so I think my intention and coming from my heart, what I was looking to say is that the member had a significant role in the development of the IAU, even through an advisory role outside of government, and I meant that in a positive way and in a complimentary way and in no other way. In terms of the particular role that the member opposite is referring to, a very important role, what I know that was identified as important by the former Minister of Justice, the current Minister of Finance. My understanding is that the process in terms of recruitment for that position is ongoing, and that there is involvement with Indigenous leadership in terms of how that recruitment should happen. And I think that that's important, given the nature of that commitment, that consultation happens.
The Honourable Member for St. John's.
I'm pretty sure that the current, although I could be wrong, that the term for the current IIU director ends relatively soon, I think. Again, I could be wrong on that, but if Zane's term is ending, is there a recruitment strategy going on right now for an appointment for an IIU civilian director? And again, I want to stress, you know, in the same way that I started some of those questions about asking about, you know, the number of BIPOC folk that are employed with the Department of Justice, and again, particularly in those positions of management and upper management and middle management. I'm wondering if in that recruitment strategy there is a move towards the appointment of a BIPOC IIU civilian director.
The Honourable Minister.
Yeah, I'm advised from officials that the member's correct in terms of the term expiring, and that the position is currently being advertised.
The Honourable Member for St. John's.
Where is that being advertised? And what's the, I haven't seen any of that. What's the deadline on that? And again, specifically, is there a move towards supporting the appointment of a BIPOC IIU civilian director? And in that, is there a strategy at ensuring there are BIPOC individuals that are applying for that position?
The Honourable Minister.
Well, in fairness to the member and probably to her research staff, I think that the position, I'm told, was just posted today online. So I don't, I'm sure that her research staff is doing a fine job and wouldn't want to suggest otherwise. And then in terms of that position, there's consultation that's happening with MKO, SCO, and AMC on the recruitment and ultimately the fulfilling of that position.
The Honourable Member for St. John's.
What's the current public inquest backlog? Where are we at in respect of a backlog within our public inquests?
The Honourable Minister.
Just for clarity, the member's asking for backlog on inquests, not on the backlog on inquiries she may have demanded. There's a big backlog on both of them, but yeah. Okay. Well, I won't speak on the inquiries she's demanded, but we will then, now that she's clarified, we will endeavor to find out where the status of an inquests are.
The Honourable Member for St. John's.
In that endeavor, perhaps the minister could provide information on what he and his department think the estimate will be to clear that backlog. And I guess, you know, to that end, like what's the average times to complete inquests?
The Honourable Minister.
I don't know if we would track average times. Imagine that could be calculated. We could probably, you know, find you the last times of the inquest for a sampling of previous inquests, and you can do the calculation. But we've already endeavored to find out the status of inquests, and we'll provide that within the rules of the of this proceeding.
The Honourable Member for St. John's.
So the minister and the department will be well aware that, I don't know when it was, maybe last year or in the last year at any rate, there was concerns about a directive about lumping inquests together. And so there was concerns from family members that felt that an inquest into how their family members died warranted its own inquest. And I'm curious for a breakdown on all the different cases that are being lumped together in one inquest, and then what was the criteria that was used to determine how different inquests were going to be kind of lumped together.
The Honourable Minister.
Sure, we've endeavored already or committed to try to get some of that information. It's just important to put on the record that, and the member knows this, I'm saying this more for those who might read Hansard, the hundreds of people who review it daily, that the chief medical examiner generally is the person who would be calling inquests, and decisions about how they're conducted or the way in which they're conducted aren't being made by the Minister of Justice or Attorney General. It wouldn't be appropriate. And again, the member knows that. I'm just making sure that others would know that as well.
The Honourable Member for St. John's.
Yeah, but I understand what the minister is attempting to say, but the direction came from somewhere to lump inquests together when traditionally, maybe that's something that also needs to kind of be highlighted. Traditionally, inquests have been, done individually. So where did the direction come
to lump them all of a sudden, all of these Manitobans who have passed into, you know, one or two different, 2 or 3, whatever it is, in class. So the direction came from somewhere. And so I do think that it's important for Manitobans, and particularly those families that were concerned with that process, how those decisions came to be, and where that direction came from, and what that currently looks like within the, and where we're currently situated right now with inquest, because there are Manitoba families that the minister knows has been waiting quite a while.
The hour being 5 p.m. Committee rise, call on the Speaker. The hour being 5 p.m., this House is adjourned and stands adjourned until tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. Have a good evening and see you all tomorrow.